Recording in progress.
Regularly scheduled. We had one last week and we have one this week. They're all regularly scheduled. So this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Facilities Committee of the City Council. And President Susan, can you be louder, please? Okay, I will do that. Thank you. And we can close the door if there's noise coming.
It's not good because I'm finding here. Why don't we leave the door open?
Leave it open?
Because they're having trouble hearing.
It makes more air. Can we turn the air up?
Yeah, turn the air up.
Oh, good.
This is a complicated job of the clerk.
I don't know how to do this either. 70 up here.
If it gets too hot, we can real.
75.
That air comes right down on your back. This is why I didn't. I don't sit.
Yeah. It is a little warm in here already. It's already hot.
Yeah. Yeah, when we had the air on. Sorry, I go.
No, it's all just for a little bit of air, so I'm not.
It's not going on. Oh, I know, okay. Well, I don't know, it won't cooperate with me.
The door.
Okay. I'm trying to turn it longer than loud, I won't, maybe you figure it out. Okay, starting again, speaking louder. Is that better? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Facilities Committee, and present at the beginning of the meeting from the committee in the room is Councillor Danberg from Ward 6, Councillor Getz from Ward 5, Councillor Kelly from Ward 3, Councillor Leary from Ward 1, myself, Susan Albright from Ward 2. And who do we have online? Anybody? Councillor Gentile from Ward 4. And I think that's it. And I see that we have Andrew Lee is here from the Law Department, and we have John Daglian, who's for some reason his name is not there. John D. You're John D, I guess. From the engineering department, and our committee clerk, Lisa Cannell. This is your what, meeting? Yes.
Are you gonna use these chairs? Can we get a chair and just a chair here?
If you go into the one across the hall, there's another chair like that one across the hall, in the corner, on the right-hand side. Okay, so let me read this into the record. This is 5625 Betsy Harper, 19 Fairmont Ave, Newton, petitioning for a main drain extension that begins at the end of the lime drain manhole near 1617 Chapin Road and extends approximately 482 feet easterly to the end of Chapin Road. This will provide a means for overflow connections to the proposed on-site infiltration system that was designed for the new dwellings. Overflow connections will be provided into the dwellings along the proposed main drain extension. You know, I've talked to a few residents, and there seems to be a little bit of confusion, and I hope I don't create more, but I do want to explain that this is a petition, as it says, for a main drain extension. When the houses, and when and if the houses are going to get built, there will be another permit required. It's called a stormwater permit. And Mr. Daglian, you might help me, but there are requirements for the 100-year storm. Am I right about that, Mr. Daglian?
Yes, that is correct. Each individual lot will have to apply for a site plan review and also a stormwater permit. It'll be a rigorous review by the engineering division to make sure it meets our standards and requirements.
Yeah, I felt it was important to say that because I think there's a lot of confusion about, is this the end of the line, and are these houses going to pour a lot of water into the street? And I don't know the answer to that question because we don't know the answer to that question, and we won't know it until the houses apply for a building permit and a storm drain, what is it called? A storm drain permit?
Stormwater management permit.
Stormwater management permit. So I just wanted to say that in the beginning, and then if you have questions about it in the public hearing part of the night, as this goes along, feel free to ask them, what part is this doing and what part is that doing, and do we have to consider both? So I'm just saying that. So the petitioner has a presentation for us.
I do.
And you're Betsy Harper, the petitioner.
I know.
So please go ahead.
Okay. So I am the petitioner, owner of lots 2 and 3. I'm going to give some overview about this petition, and then I'm going to be joined by my general contractor, Tagore Hernandez of Group Design Build. He will be in charge of the construction of the storm drain, as well as all the infrastructure that goes into the site itself, the road extension, the sidewalks, and that sort of thing. And I'm also joined by Mike Cosmo, who is from Everett Brooks. He was the original engineer who designed the site back in 2023, when the original owner of the site petitioned to have it considered for a subdivision. So he has all the background knowledge and has also done some additional work to answer questions that came up at the March 19th meeting. Well, both of these guys. Okay, now I'm pushing this button and it's not advancing, whereas it just did before. Okay. Okay, I am screen sharing. Do you want to click them out? Okay. We'll do it via the mouse. So just as Susan, Chair Albright just explained, that this petition is actually very narrowly defined. It's just for a stormwater extension from an existing manhole on Chapin Road. It is not to approve a full stormwater plan. It was required by the engineering department at the time of the subdivision approval, and it must be installed before the building plans can even be developed. I'm going to say this twice, but I'm going to say it on the first page. The drain extension will not worsen existing property conditions. It is not something that's going to happen from a drain extension on the street. We can confidently say that. So Councilor Leary actually asked me about the stormwater ordinance, and the new goals of that ordinance are very appropriate. That the attempt is to try to have more and more on-site infiltration. There will be some on-site infiltration that is developed behind when the building designs. No, that's all. Yeah. Thank you.
There's some air.
So we will do as much on-site infiltration as we can. We will have as much pervious materials as we can. That there is definite new credence to the goal for all of Newton to have as much contained on-site as possible. However, the ordinance does allow that off-site stormwater discharge if full containment isn't feasible. In this case, high groundwater, in other cases, ledge. The proposed plan includes an on-site capture system. There are 2 catch basins right at the curb cut that will go between the Chapin Road extension and Chapin Road. There's a large filtration system to get rid of phosphorus and other things that we don't want in our system. And as I said, at the time of each house design, the infiltration systems for each of those houses will be designed in detail. Let's see if that still doesn't work. So this storm drain extension is not just to help the existing or the new subdivision, but it was really intended as a benefit to the city and to the homeowners. Because as you know, there's no current drainage system for a large part of Chapin Road. And it does create cooling in certain places after heavy rains. So the drain extension will remove street water, because some of the water that goes onto the street currently comes from those lots 2 and 3. So those will no longer be going onto the street. To the extent that houses stub in, that stormwater will no longer be going out into the street. Because we have a problem. The neighborhood has a high water table and lots of lots that slope down to the road. So some of the homeowners have put in on-site drainage systems to help solve this problem, because it's a nuisance for a lot of people. Others have some pumps that are cycling all the time, putting water back onto their property. Some of that water goes back into the street, and that will go back into the basement, back on the property, into the street. And others are using gutter extensions with similar results. The water is just flowing down the gutter into the front lawn and onto the street. So we're really trying to create a benefit to you as the homeowners in the neighborhood. The subdivision requirements were actually increased to help neighbors back when the public hearings were held in September and October of 2023. There were some concerns about, again, the stormwater situation. So we did look at the history of what utility calls have we had. There really only been catch basin clogs that have been called into the utilities division. But, and there have been no complaints of massive street flooding with damage and impeding traffic and all that. But engineering did want to be responsive.
Sorry, Betsy, can you just wait a minute?
Okay.
As people come in.
Okay.
We don't need these. We don't need these.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind. I'm gonna put some people in front of you.
It's good.
Sure, sure.
Here, come over here.
Sure. Hey, Priest.
I can't help
No
being in
reason
love.
why, no reason why.
Yeah. But don't put them at the table.
It's gonna be wrong.
Chair. I'm sorry to listen.
Sorry.
Are they gonna come in?
What's this? No.
Oh, sorry, Betsy.
That's okay.
This is for the table.
It's and all. I raised my two children here. I've been in Newton for 33 years, so I'm very sympathetic to children. I can't wait for those children. In any case, back to what we're trying to present. So the engineering department wanted to be responsive to the concerns that the public had voiced during those public hearings, and they required a betterment and put in these 14 notes because that would help the property owners with their existing groundwater problems. So this is not a groundwater problem that is being worsened by the drain extension. It's a problem that's been there for decades, but the engineering department said, okay, well, as long as you're gonna put in this drain, let's add the extra, frankly, cost and effort to put into these 14 nuts to help these 14 neighbors. And again, I'm saying it again, this drain extension will not worsen existing property conditions, which seems to be a confusion. There's also a note in some location, there was a concern about the plan withdrawal back in January of last year. That was not due to any technical issues as confirmed by the civil engineer. It was due to the owner's personal reasons. So neighbors have reported some street flooding concerns back in some of the earlier hearings. And there have been, most recently, some storms, like in July 2023, citywide flooding, especially near City Hall Pond. And that has led to, one of the major undertakings that we have done to dredge City Hall Pond and reline it and make that more viable. Because as Agora will show, there's all kinds of culverts that flow into City Hall. And so it really needs to be a robust system. It was actually a little interesting to me that looking at the data for rainfall in the last 15 years in Newton, it has not increased. I'm actually work a lot in climate change and high performance buildings and passive house certified buildings. And I would have thought that, rainfall was going up. But it's actually, the data says it has not. What we do have with climate change, as you know, is increased storms. So we have, some flash storms that are definitely problematic. Those will continue. Periodic storms happen, and they will cause short-term flooding throughout Newton, on Chapin Road and everywhere else. It's just not feasible to not have flooding after these major storms. But the question was, is the city structure robust? And we'll go into more detail again tomorrow. We'll talk about the culverts are massively sized and they're way oversized for a 100-year storm. The tributary pipes that go down each of the streets that go into these culverts are smaller, but that's what is throughout all of Newton, 12-inch pipes that are standard city practice that are enabling the flow to go into the culverts effectively. And larger pipes, people have asked, why can't we just put larger pipes everywhere? Well, you can't economically dig up all of the city pipes all across Newton and put in, 20 inch pipes, number one. And number two, John Daglin was joking, you can't fit them physically, you just can't get down that deep. So they're working, and they are what they should be. Just to go through again a little bit more, the details, the stub connections will be planned, very carefully with each homeowner for the best placement so that it works most effectively with whatever drainage system they have or don't have. I will install, just as a benefit to the neighborhood, 2 new catch basins at locations where there has been some pooling. We were out there a couple of times and we saw some pooling right across from Heidi's house at 39 Stafford Road. That seemed to be the largest amount of pooling. There wasn't a tremendous amount of pooling, frankly, from even heavy rains like we had on Sunday night. But I will also be putting in granite curbing to help reduce debris that gets into these catch basins if you're not protecting them with curbing. And I'm also going to add granite curbing to the 2 existing city catch basins. And I'm keeping asked for more. And I keep saying, okay, whatever is going to make the neighborhood feel comfortable, that I really am trying to do the right thing. Okay, so we had 3 questions come up in our last meeting. The first was, what is Newton's downstream infrastructure integrity and capacity? Do we really have the capacity to add this additional storm drain extension? And will that suddenly, overwhelm the rest of what we have? DPW confirmed the City Hall culverts are clean and functioning. When they did the overhaul of City Hall Pond, they scrubbed all those culverts, these huge big culverts. And then Tagore, he did some inspections and found very high integrity of both the street pipe near number 17. And then there's a culvert that probably you haven't noticed, even the manhole there, but in the backyard or on a public way right next to the backyard of number 16. So those culverts were looked at and have excessive capacity for the catch basins. So I think we're good on that. The next question, why can't I advance this? This is silly. Okay, the next question that was posed is, will the subdivision sustain a 100-year storm? And Mike from Everett Brooks is going to go through that again. The analysis was provided in August of 2023 by the Board of Survey, and that was all done prior to the subdivision's approval. It's important to recognize that there's no anticipated increase to either of the watersheds that are right on the subdivision. There are a couple of different watersheds, but there are 2 on the subdivision. One flows down towards Chapin Road, and the other goes to that southeastern back low-lying area that borders the Contiguous Aqueduct and as well number 55. That overflow will actually decrease because some of the water is being diverted into the new storm drain. And then as we keep saying that there will be a major stormwater management permit concurrent with the building permit and complying with the 100-year storm requirements. So that's not being evaluated tonight. The things that are being evaluated are just the drain line. So the specific question, third question, came in 2 parts. Does the existing drain line on Chapin Road have sufficient capacity? And does the proposed drain extension have sufficient capacity for the entire watershed of the 14 properties plus the 2 proposed townhouses? So Mike is going to take you through some calculations. He concluded that there's definitely sufficient capacity for each of those existing as well as the proposed. And we've sat down with John Daglin a couple of times. All this work has been reviewed by him, and he has been happy with the analysis. My last slide is neighborhood collaboration is my thing. I mean, I have done only 1 house ever in my life. because again, I'm a passive house, certified, passionate person. And I built with Tagore, actually Tagore built it all. It was my vision, but he did all the hard work. A house in Cambridge, and it was tough in the beginning. The neighbors were very, very nervous about change. They were very, very nervous about a nicer house on their, street that had ever been there, because they wanted to keep the spirit of their neighborhood and not have new people coming in who were going to be different than them. As it turned out, the neighbors loved the house, but it was a lot of work getting there. And it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Doing construction is not simple and it's not fast. And there's a lot, especially in this construction, there's a lot of complexity. We have very highly experienced site professionals who are going to work under Tagore, and the Department of Engineering is going to be all over this. It's a very high profile project, and there will be nothing that they don't have their eyes on. Tagore is, I think, he's a phenomenal designer. But his real secret sauce, I think, is the communication he has with neighbors. He is just very, very, he puts that as top priority, and he's done enough houses to know that that's how to be successful, and that's how he would be doing this one. But again, the last point is that the homeowners, in order to solve their own historical groundwater problems, will need to participate. They will need to make an investment. If they don't want to make the investment, they will continue to have ineffective systems that continue to have groundwater problems on their property and flowing onto the street. So that's a very hard pill to swallow. I know nobody wants to, have to replace their roof. Nobody wants to have to repaint their house. It costs money, but that's what home ownership is. And if you want to make sure that you protect your house from rot, from other problems, if you want to increase your resale value, you need to do maintenance. And you don't have to nub in, but our strong recommendation is to do so, and it's for your benefit to do it. So that's all I have to say, and I'm going to turn it over to Tagore. So let me make sure I can get out of this. Not sharing that one. Either drop there. Oh, I'm still miss. Sorry, I need my IT person.
You need these in the
on. End of slideshow. Click to exit. Okay, now I need to go to. Here we go to slideshow. And we go to screen. Why is screen share not down here? Yeah. I enlarge this. Oh, here we go. I'm actually supposed to be retired. It's not working out so well. This is a little more than whatever. This right here is what I want. So it should be. Share. There we go. Share. But the share button is different on every screen. It's just interesting. Okay, and then what I have to do is go to slideshow and click restart to make it bigger. Okay, and for some reason I have to use the mouse to hit next on the third. Okay.
Or just take that off.
I tried that.
You were doing that.
I tried it. I don't think fine. I get to do it right.
You.
Yeah, you can go.
Greetings, neighbors, council members. Thank you very much for taking the time to come out and voice concerns and learn more about what we're petitioning. My name is Tagore Hernandez. I'm the director of Group Design Build, which is a design, architecture, and construction firm specializing in, briefly speaking, just green buildings. So we do net zero, net neutral, off-grid, We work with Gray Water Systems, and we've been collaborating with Betsy for about 5 years now. I want to thank the neighbors specifically for, usually I don't like these meetings or butters because we're having to deal with people who just don't want change. But in this particular case, I am actually really thankful to the neighbors for posing hard questions, and for just making sure that we're actually meeting the standard that's appropriate with the standard of care necessary to meet the standards of the city. I know that there's a ton of development that's going on in Newton that's just not nice and it's not great. And I know every developer says that they're not that team, but we really are not that team. But you know, you wouldn't know that unless you had held us to the fire and asked hard questions and insisted on accountability and transparency. So I think one of the reasons why I'm thankful specifically is because I don't think Betsy and I really knew what this system was or what we were doing. We just, you know, inherited these drawings from civil engineer. We're told, oh yeah, everything's fine, but we didn't really know what the system, what the impacts were, or the benefits, or what the problems that existed on site were. So, you know, having learned about all of that, I think has just made us more confident about moving forward, but also more aware of the benefits that were in the previous proposal and in the new proposal as well. So some of the neighbors, some of these slides they're not for everybody, but some of these slides are specifically tailored to some of the specific questions that some of you had, or some of the stuff isn't that interesting to you. Somebody asked, well, what is the system? All right. So it's a little hard to tell on the screen, but here the red dot is the site. We've got a red line, a pink line, and a yellow line, and then a bunch of black lines. This is all of the underground storm lines, right? They were built starting in the 20s all the way through the 40s. The pink line represents the original culvert that services Chapin Road, built in 1930. It's called the Hammond Brook culvert because, and you notice it actually cuts through everybody's properties as opposed to running down streets. It was basically an old river that would just drain into City Hall Pond and would daylight and fill up the pond, which then overflows into Bellows Pond, which is, you know, undergoing a huge proposal for a massive restoration process. So some, you know, roughly in, you know, 29, there was a proposal to basically modernize the city's storm system. And in 1930, they basically dug the brook out and buried these large concrete chambers. Then 8 years later, 1938, the yellow line, they extended that original culvert to basically have a fully modern underground storm system going from basically the aquifer, and you know, that started along near Chapin Road all the way to City Hall Pond. And then the arrows on these lines indicate the flow of direction. So the culvert that we're specifically interested in for our project, you can see services a pretty, you know, wide range of homes. It looks like it's maybe, you know, approximately about 100 homes or so, maybe half a dozen streets.
What color are you referring to?
The pink and the yellow.
Pink and yellow.
Yeah. So this is the original one. And notice all the other heavy bold lines, the black ones, those were installed when those roads were made. So they actually put those in as they were building the road. But the Hammond Pond or the Hammond Brook culvert, our culvert that we're interested in, that was done through properties to take advantage of an existing topography and existing geography. What is the culvert, right? These culverts are approximately 5 feet by 9 foot concrete, steel reinforced concrete chambers. They're really big. I thought that they were these like clay pipes, or like, I honestly didn't even know what they were. I thought maybe they were bricks, or I didn't know. So we dredged up these drawings from historical records. So this is a drawing from 1930, the approved permit drawing. And I put a little figure in there just so you can get a sense of the scale, right? So these are really big, way oversized for the needs back then and today's needs. And so you can see the pink line, right? So that's basically the extent of it. We go back to the map so you can see where it fits on the plan. Now we're going to jump to the 1938, where they made it a little bit bigger, not much, but just like, about 6 inches bigger in each direction, which would make sense because it's servicing more property, more tributary space, but it's the same concrete box, if you will, that are referred to as galleys. When new projects get built in Newton, they have to have storm systems and they have galleys on the properties themselves, but they're usually made out of plastic. But back then, back in the 30s, they didn't have that kind of reinforced plastic technology, so they made out of concrete. These are 1 foot thick concrete walls. Somebody had asked, well, and just to kind of cover real briefly, the capacity of the original culvert, built in 1930s, approximately 470 cubic feet per second. And the extension has a broader capacity of 745 cubic feet per second. What does that mean? A 100-year storm, which is a really, really heavy rainstorm, right? That's about 12 cubic feet per second. So to give you a sense of just how much capacity the culverts have. So this is a response to, well, the problem must be the culverts, right? If there is a problem, it's not the culverts. So we kept looking. Then we wanted to see, well, what is the condition of the culverts? So we opened up, if you look at the drawing on the right, that is right behind 17 Chapin. That's on somebody's property on an easement because these culverts run through all these properties which are along the city easement. So I went with DPW, engineering department, city official. We opened up the manhole and inspected. And you can't tell from the photograph, but that's 5 feet deep and, it's roughly 10 foot wide. And this was this is the day after a moderate rain. I think there's maybe a half inch of rain or so. And there's about 2 inches of water flowing through this. But part of the reason why it's flowing is also because it's grabbing water from the pituit. Yeah, so it's constant, it's usually discharging. But what's notable is, and this is better to see digitally than you can on the screen, but you can tell by looking at the concrete wall on the left side of it that there's no marking on the wall. In other words, there's no higher water table. Like there hasn't been, which would tell us that, it's usually at 30% capacity or 10%. In fact, there's no marking or staining on the walls at all, which indicate that this thing is, at most, maybe it gets it could have a flood that may have a higher, water level. But what we learned from this is that it's not really under capacity. More specifically, this is the older one built in 1930. That wall looks almost brand new. That there isn't spalling, there wasn't cracking. We were able to basically point cameras in both directions, looking as deep as we could. And this is the older one, and it looks like it's in great condition. That is important to one or two of the butters that asked us, is this some old, falling apart thing? Because we didn't really know the answer to that. So what we discovered and documented was that, in fact, the systems are in great condition. Just to put it into perspective, there are Roman aqueducts made of unreinforced concrete from the year 300 AD that are still working today. So, in the world of civil engineering, right, a system built in 1930 isn't very old at all. So, we feel pretty good about we feel very confident about the system. So does DPW and so does civil engineering department. So just to recap, the two systems have approximately, let's say at minimum 470 cubic feet per second capacity. 100-year storm is significantly less than that. One of the, during the storm from two years ago in July, where there was a ton of flooding, one of the things that the city discovered was that they needed to dredge the City Hall pond. That there was in fact clogging that led to the backlogging of lots of streets, and that has since been done. It was reported to us by DPW that our culvert was flushed out last year and cleaned of debris, which we confirmed, and we're only looking at one manhole here, but we did notice that there was absolutely no debris. And also the pipes, the storm pipes from the street itself were also flushed out. Let's see, well, it stopped. You're right, it just stopped.
So let's take the mouse. Oh, you got your back, okay, so what you do is you right click, okay, and then hit next.
All right.
I don't know.
All right, so just once again, the 90-year storm is still young. We noticed about 2 inches of flow at the bottom, so it's significantly it's very underutilized, considering there's 60 inches of vertical space capacity, and that the interior was in good condition. Next, we were asked to look at the pipe on the street itself, the thing that the extension will be connecting to. This is it's probably, roughly 1930s-year-old clay pipe. And we needed to do camera work, and this has been video recorded. And we were looking for cracks, breaks, roots, anything that would suggest that there was a clog in the system, which would lead to street flooding. And it turned out that it was in fact very clean. What was not clean were the two lateral pipes that connected to the manholes, not the manholes, the
Catch basins.
catch basins. Those were clogged. Those were flushed out. The other thing that the engineering department was looking for was for this, water table line, basically marking on the pipe to give us a visual clue as to how much capacity the pipe has based on history, if you will. That's usually a result of lines that you see along the pipe. What I drew on here was 30%, but if you look, the markings are actually slightly below that. So even in the most conservative analysis of this, we are still under 30% capacity of the pipe.
If I can ask a quick question. To my understanding, the marking is standing water, not flowing water. So I don't understand why the marking would indicate how much capacity the pipe would have. Usually marking on the wall is standing water, not flowing water.
Right, but if you had lots of rain and there was always water at a higher level, the staining would indicate to us how high water can get on a regular basis. Because sometimes there may be no flowing water at all, but you'll still have some staining along the sides.
I'm fine with you asking your question, but by and large, let's wait, and when we reopen the public hearing, we'll give you the opportunity to speak. Others.
So just to recap this, the 12-inch diameter clay pipe, 60 feet in length, was clear of debris. The high water mark that we noticed from the CCTV camera work showed that it was below 30%, which is what the engineering department was looking to confirm and to clarify. And there were no signs of surcharge or any blockage. The proposed pipe is a concrete pipe of equal diameter and will basically not connect directly with this pipe, but at the manhole itself. So the other thing I wanted to look at was, so we've been out to the site on a variety of different occasions right after rainstorms, and sometimes I've noticed pooling. This is a photograph that we got from one of the abutters during I'm not sure exactly when this photograph was taken, but this is one of the classic examples of the ponding that's taking place on the street. This is not a result of the culvert, nor a result of the 12-inch pipe below, but really a result of the clogging of the catch basin at the street. So that little red square that I'm drawing, that we drew on here, is right where the catch basin is, right? The photograph on the left, I took 10 days after the water department came out and cleaned it. So I wanted to sort of work off of like, well, what's happening here? And understand like, you know, why is this pooling happening so much? So, you know, after our first hearing, there was concerns about the system being clogged. John Daglian made a request and the water department came out and cleaned it days afterwards. 10 days later, I came and photographed the two catch basins here. And the reason it's open is because I kind of took my foot and pushed it open. So this just shows you how quickly the catch basins can get dirty. And I think, and I've been told, this has been told to me by a number of different professionals, that the chronic issue is that because there's no curbing, right, what happens is the water, you get this flash flood, or, you know, let's call it quick flooding of water that then starts to saturate the edge of the ground, right? So if you look at the top left photograph, that's like basic art, right? So it starts to mix with dirt, with leaves, and because there's no concrete edging, there's no way for the water to kind of act within a guttered environment, but rather spread out, and it creates a vicious cycle where it starts to, you know, start pulling in debris and organic matter from the yard. And you can't tell from this photograph because of the screen, but if you looked at my picture, you could see that there's tire marks on some of that organic debris. So basically it rains, it starts to flood somebody's front yard or the sidewalk, if you will, because there's no hard edge or gutter, or excuse me, granite curbing, which is usually 8 inches of separation. That then starts to bring in organic matter. People drive over it, it packs it in, and you basically clog the catch basin. So I mean, it doesn't. I'm not a civil engineer, but like if you clog the only drain in the ground, then you're going to get this kind of ponding.
Just the reason why I have volunteered to put in granite curbing at both of the existing cities' catch basins. Because the city doesn't want to do it, so I will do it. And the two new catch basins that I will add on the street, I will also put in granite curbing next to that. So we will alleviate that problem. It would be best if everybody had curbing along the street, but at least we will do everything we can to prevent this happening right at the catch basins in the future. We are definitely bettering the street.
So yeah, so when we went back to engineering and we showed these images with the engineering department, they recommended that we, because neighbors have not expressed interest in paying into the betterment program to get curb, which really would make a difference because they would treat the street like a gutter that would then have more controlled water. So what we're going to do, what we're proposing rather, is to basically add granite curbing at both of these catch basins, in addition to granite curbing on 2 more catch basins that we're going to be adding to the projects.
How long?
I think John asked for 6 feet, right? So, it really wants to be the street, but that's really, it's a relatively inexpensive betterment program that abutters could explore. There was this question about rain. It's getting worse every year. There's more rain, and I actually believed it. So I decided to look at the data, and I looked at 15 years. And if you notice, this last year we got 45.8 inches of rain, which is the same as 2010, right? So there's an average. We get anywhere from 45 to 50, 43. Basically, there seems to be, the trend is that there hasn't been significant increase in rainfall. There is more concentration of it, but it's not the same thing as, increase in rainfall.
It's, what is he gonna do? Are you getting close to the end?
Yeah, so I'll just cap by saying that, we. I think so, what's important to understand high level is that the problem, I don't think that the chronic issue is really local. I actually think it's a macro issue, and it's not necessarily, it's the daylighting system itself, right? So all of us, because I live in Somerville, I have the same problem. On an old daylighting system, meaning the water goes to basically small bodies of water. In your particular case, is City Hall Pond that then goes into Burroughs Pond. And Burroughs Pond is Apollo's Pond, excuse me, is being looked at for a massive, like a major restoration, which would make a huge difference to the city's storm system. So
Not really.
not much of a system.
No, the issue with Burroughs Pond is that
The dam.
is the dam. The dam needs to be.
It needs to be fixed, okay,
State dam safety is making us do that.
I see. So,
Okay, we need to keep moving because we're taking up more time than we anticipated.
sorry.
We want to have time for people to speak, so okay.
Is John Dagnan gonna comment? Is John gonna comment?
Are you done, Betsy?
It's almost
Yeah.
8:00.
No, we have the engineer to give a report.
Okay,
How much
long
time
is
did
it?
you have altogether?
There's not a limit.
So,
Well, there has been.
so wait, here's the question that I need to ask. The neighbors are here to learn about this system and this street and this particular petition. And I think the petitioner is trying to provide the information that the neighbors are asking for. And we may not want to, we as a committee may not want to hear it, but I think the neighbors are interested. Am I right? If the neighbors are interested in this information?
We just appreciate the same amount of time to voice our concern.
The petitioner makes the petition's argument, and that's different from the time for the other side. It is, that's the way it, and I've been
The
involved.
parties do not have equal time? Is that
No,
what you're saying?
no, the petitioner is trying to explain their project. If you don't want their project explained, we can stop them right now and go on to public hearing. I just kind of felt like there's a lot of information here and that it's very complicated. And I thought you wanted that information. If I'm wrong, we'll stop it right now. You want me to have them
I
stop?
thought we wanted the information in writing for review.
The information was in writing and prepared in the packet. So if you didn't read it, I'm sorry,
it's all
but
in
it
the
was
packet.
there.
Yeah, I mean, it was in the packet at page 93 of what you recently sent back. It also said that there are further reports and tests that need to be done, which we were gonna point out as soon as, we have time to talk to.
Okay, so Betsy, I think we need you to expedite the rest of
I
this.
think an exchange is really useful and not another report, because I don't know when people are gonna leave, but if the committee gets up and walks out at 8:00, then I don't think.
We're not gonna get up and walk out. No.
Nobody's going anywhere.
Nobody's going anywhere. Anybody that wants to speak is gonna have an opportunity to speak.
That was our point, like not too much on this one presentation to leave room for the other side for questions. This committee is not leaving while this is on the floor. That's not the issue here. We're just trying to make it be fair and balanced and not have so much time. In my experience, it's unusual to have over an hour presentation by the one side, but I agree with Councillor Albright. We're trying to provide information for people so that we all understand what's going on. But how long do you think it's gonna take?
I can be a little bit quicker.
Then
because
what?
a lot of what I'm gonna say has been said. I might look at.
Great.
more
Good.
detail.
So you'll
So
have
maybe
to-
I can speed this up.
Great,
And then if I didn't give enough information, maybe some questions.
that's right. I think that's the way to handle it.
Perfect.
That might be faster and it might help because I'm not sure I can make this work.
Okay, if you could just introduce.
Sure,
yourself.
my name's Michael Cosmo, I'm with Everett Brooks Company, we're the engineers, we were the engineers for the original subdivision back in the fall of 2023. Just look it up in a second, sorry. So the original subdivision was approved by the Board of Survey, reviewed by the engineering department. There was high groundwater on site, so we couldn't infiltrate for the roadway itself. So in order to reduce flows for the 210, 25, and 100-year storms, we requested the overflow extension to the city system. And with that, we're able to reduce flows.
You wanna do something?
Fine, you can go skip over that part.
There
There are two watersheds that are,
there were two watersheds in the original subdivision. There was one existing watershed. After development, there were two. Smalls, one went to the on-site catch basins. That's the one that increased a little bit without the overflow. The remainder flows to the rear, and because of that small area being taken out, that's reduced. So we then, as a condition of the approval, we were required to, or this petition required an analysis of that receiving 12-inch drain at the manhole toward the end of Chapin Road. It also required stubs for future sump pump connections to the system, to the property line, so that the abutters would not have to open up the street at every point. So that would be a benefit. This is a watershed map of what we look at as contributing to that existing drain manhole. We can see it in red, goes up Stafford Road almost all the way up to Homer Street, all the way back to the subdivision, partway south of Chapin, and then that watershed that I mentioned, that was contributor, the small one on the subdivision also contributes from those two on-site catch basins. So again, our task was to show the capacity of that drain line, which is 2% slope. And the capacity of that is, as you can see on the screen, 5.5 cubic feet per second. And the existing flow to that without the subdivision, without the extension, is 3.5 cubic feet per second. And the proposed flow is 4.15. That includes picking up the catch basins. Well, that would get there anyway, but it's some added flow from the subdivision itself and from the sump pumps. So we included sump pump calculations, an estimate of a average sump pump connecting to the system, the flow from the two on-site catch basins. Just for illustration purposes, you can see there's a 4.8 cubic feet per second shown there. If the houses shown on the subdivision plan, which were just basically sketches to show what can be built, because you can only build a certain size house because of lot coverage concerns, even if they 100% building and driveway were to connect to the system, it would still not overtax that system. But again, if they do connect, that would all be shown on final site plans, drainage calculations for each individual lot, additional soil testing would be done on the properties, full designs, we need building plans, and all of that would be for each individual lot. Everything would meet the stormwater management ordinance, 100-year storm, 210, 25, 100-year storm. So all of that would have to be approved by the city. But because we're adding 2 additional catch basins on the property, there is a mocked up plan at the back of it that shows The blue shows the new line, shows the locations of the catch basins. Because we're adding catch basins to the originally proposed drain extension, and then we're adding those potential sump pump connections, we just wanted to confirm that the pipe we designed was adequate to take that additional flow. And the capacity of that pipe at the slope is 4 cubic feet per second. You can see that it's anywhere from 0.2 to 3.2 feet per cubic feet per second. So that's adequate and does not have to be redesigned. Again, the 2 additional catch basins are proposed. Granite curbing, what we're proposing, both at the 2 new catch basin locations but I just wanted to mention that they're gonna be 6-foot curb inlets with 2 additional 6-foot slopes. So it's a total of 18 feet. When that question came up. So it's 18 feet of curbing at those 2 at those 4 points. And then
Yes.
finally, as we said, each site will have to meet the stormwater management ordinance requirements so that there is no adverse impacts to anybody.
Mr. Dagley, you don't need to do you need to add anything? I think not. Am I right about that? Did you have anything that you needed to add?
Just that their numbers are correct, they were verified and they're accurate.
Okay, thank you. So we can now go to the neighborhood. And I understand you have a short presentation that you'd like to have made. Am I right about that? Somebody here is going to make a presentation, or I'll give you up to 10 minutes if that's, is that you?
Our council, Dennis Murphy, represents.
That's you.
Yes, Madam Chair.
If you could just identify yourself.
Good evening, Dennis Murphy from Hill Law. I represent, I think, everybody in the perimeter of the room. It's nice to be back in Newton. I appreciate the opportunity to try to articulate what the neighborhood concerns are from both a legal and engineering perspective. So the one thing I would call your attention to is a document that was shared this afternoon. It was in connection with the Board of Survey approval of the subdivision. And at that time, what the city engineer was recommending was that the capacity of the system to ensure additional flow from the proposed road and subdivision residential homes would be assessed in the future. And now we're getting told the same exact thing. That is, that in connection with the subdivision, don't worry about the flooding. We're going to address that when we get to, by the way, this is the Board of Survey packet. It's page 93 of the PDF. It's in the first paragraph. So this site is unique in 2 respects. First of all, it is basically an unbuildable site on its own because of the depth to ground. The second thing that makes it unique is there's already an existing flooding problem. And if you're a professional and you have to design stormwater infrastructure, that is a design challenge that you have to account for. Standard 2 requires that all rainfall that falls on a given site has to be captured, treated, and infiltrated on that site. That cannot happen on this site. That's admitted. The engineer admits it. Your own city engineer admits that. That's not contested. That's what makes this special and different, and why you shouldn't be approving a drain extension without actually doing the work required for the major stormwater permit. They're inextricably linked because the site doesn't perk. On the plans, it calls for 5 feet of fill to raise the grade. So up to my neck. That will change the grade and the existing flow patterns. One of the design points is you evaluate watershed. This has created a new watershed Pre-development, there's one watershed. Post-development, there are two. That ought to be really explored with the engineer, which you heard in the presentation has to happen anyway. All we're suggesting is it happen now so that before you approve a plan and a drain extension, we have all of the data and it's taken into account. So let me make a couple of points about how it impacts the folks that are here in the room. Number 55 Chapin is the low, that's on the downhill side. And I understand there are catch basins, and I appreciate that we're even able to have this conversation. And that what I see just since I filed my letter last week is certainly a step in the right direction and an improvement. And I don't want to sound ungrateful for that. But I'm not sure we have all the information that you ultimately should have before you make a reasonable judgment. So one of the things that is a principle, legal and environmental principle, is the concept of segmentation. You can't actually piecemeal permit. You actually have to do a design that takes into account the holistic evaluation of the site. And that's a comment our engineer made, that this is a segmentation, that is, they're saying, you can think of it as incrementalism. Just give us the subdivision approval, which they did. Now just give us the drain extension, which they're asking you for. By the time we get to a building permit and you're actually doing the real engineering for a major, by the way, a major stormwater permit is anytime you create 1,000 square feet of new impervious coverage, but this exceeds it. Again, they're inextricably linked because without this drain extension, the site is unbuildable because you can't infiltrate the water from the site on the site. So that's why we're suggesting that instead of segmenting it, instead of doing what the Board of Survey did with the subdivision, that you actually require the applicant to take the next step so that we don't get to the stage of, back here in a year or whenever it is, talking about the same thing that they were talking about a couple of years ago when they did the subdivision approval. One last thing is a kind of a technical thing. So the current elevation of people's basements and sump pumps and the plans, the new subdivision would have houses that are at a higher grade by at least 5 feet than the current houses. So one comment from the engineer that we retain is that the actual drain as designed may not be deep enough in the ground. It is being designed. I appreciate that they have included stubs for my clients. That is helpful, no doubt about it, and I don't mean to sound ungrateful. But if the elevation of the pipe in the road is being designed for houses that are 5 feet, at least 5 feet higher, that pipe may not actually service these other 14 houses. So that's another issue on this exact application that our engineer has identified and I don't think has been resolved. So I think that that kind of sums it up. I think there will be questions I'd be happy to answer. The one other thing that occurs to me, the recommendations on the page that I cited earlier include an O&M plan, that's operations and maintenance plan for the stormwater system. And the recommendation from the city engineer is that the O&M plan, I'm reading it, page 93, will have to be drafted and submitted for review and approval. And once approved, must be adopted by the homeowners and referenced in their respective deeds. So you're asking us, my clients, to buy into an O and M plan that I haven't even seen yet. Because if they're gonna tie into the system, they're gonna have to buy into the maintenance. It's not gonna be just the two owners at the end of the street where the new subdivision is. So that's another sort of loose end that hasn't been tied up. But that's really beside the point. That's a legal issue that I'm sure that will work out eventually. My bigger point is there is still some engineering to do. There is still, that has to be done anyway. Please do it now so that we have confidence that the storm drain is actually gonna function in the way that the applicant has asserted. Thank you.
So you've raised some issues. The question is, do we want to address some of your questions now? Or do we want to just go on and hear from the rest of the neighbors? What's your pleasure, folks?
Does your engineer want to say
Yeah,
anything, or is
I'd
that
like
the
to
end
hear
of
from
the
the engineer.
presentation?
Is your engineer here?
Yeah, let's see. He's a peer reviewer for many towns, and he was gonna dial in when he finished in Norwell, so I don't see him. John Cheshire, I don't see him on the screen.
Okay. Well,
Can
maybe
you
he'll.
get a response of these folks to what he said?
Yeah, I think that's what I think it makes more sense to address some of the issues that you've raised.
Yeah.
And if that's okay with all of you.
Yeah.
Councilor Danbury?
I'd like to hear from Mr. Daglian in regards to depth of the pipe, the O and M plan and the drainage design. If I understand, Mr. Murphy correctly, he wants additional information prior to the, houses being designed. And it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that the drainage plan that the city does is in response to the design of the house. So it would not be possible to explain or describe rather that piece of the drainage plan, because you have to wait until the square footage of the house and how much impermeable surface you have before you get there.
So the city doesn't do the drainage plan. I don't think you meant that. The city doesn't do the plan that the
The
people building the homes.
homeowner, yes, I didn't mean the city, I
Yeah.
meant the
Yeah.
the homeowner's drainage plan.
So, Mr. Daglian, should we go through some of these and respond and provide your answers that people can ask more questions?
Sure. So first of all, the design of the elevation of the pipe. The elevation is fixed because they have to tie into the existing manhole, which is this location right here. If you could see my screen. This is the existing drain manhole that they have to tie into. So the elevation is fixed from this point back towards the subdivision. Additionally, there's only 2 lots that are on the subdivision itself. And the O and M that the attorney was referring to would be the O and M for the 2 property owners on their own specific site and their own infiltration system that they have to maintain our NIPD stormwater permit requirements.
So to make sure I understand, the O and M plan is for the 2 subdivisions, of the subdivision properties.
That's correct, and only for them.
For
on the
anybody else.
street.
Once this drain main is installed, the city will take ownership of the main itself and maintain the pipe and all the catch basins and drain manholes associated with the maintenance of the pipe.
Okay, I didn't understand your answer, however, on the 5 feet. Could you explain why you circled that, but I don't know why?
This is the area where it's fixed. This is the elevation where the pipe has to tie in. This pink pipe that the developer is going to install has to come in at this elevation because it's fixed. It's a fixed existing condition. They have to tie into that point and use the slope to make the work, to make it properly.
I see.
Okay?
Number taken is that?
What, is this the subdivision?
It's 17.
This is the drain main extension for the subdivision and also for the benefit of all the property owners.
I don't know what number Chapin is that starting at? Would that be starting at?
It's at number 16 and 17, which is the downstream side. And then as it goes easterly, almost 500 feet is where the drain main extension will start.
So that's the drain. Well, that you told us was a sewer line when we were on the site last week, correct?
No, it was properly labeled. I verified it. It's a drain manhole that they're tying into.
Okay, that was just a mistake during our site visit.
Right.
So you're saying that because the level of the site and because the drainage is gravity fed, it has to go up 5 feet? Is that what you're saying?
No.
The depth of the pipe is fixed because they have to tie into an existing manhole. This is where all the water is going to flow towards the left. Okay, so whether they have no choice but putting the pipe at that elevation and coming in at the 1% slope that they're proposing.
I won't worry about my not understanding.
Level 3 is fixed. Okay,
Yeah.
you're not gonna change the elevation of the street. You're not
No,
gonna change the elevation.
nothing, the street is not the elevation. And then he had a question about the pipe not being at the right elevation. The problem is these houses are on sump pumps, excuse me. So they would be pumping to a structure on the property. Say, for example, he's pointed out number 55. So this house has a sump pump that's discharging either to the front yard or the backyard. So ultimately with this red line, which is the rough stub location, their sump pump would connect this way to a structure here. So this is a forced main coming out of the house, tying into this structure, and then flowing gravity to the drain main that will be installed by the applicant. So regardless of where their sump pump is, the pumps usually have a lot of capacity to pump up, probably like 7 or 8 feet, if not more sometimes. These sump pumps are usually always over designed.
So the first thing Mr. Murphy said was that this is an unbuildable site. Can you address that? Or can somebody address that?
I mean, everyone has their own opinion. Based on the requirements that we have, stormwater analysis and stormwater management, these two lots will have to get permits for stormwater management systems on their property. They'll have to have infiltration systems. They've done some test pits. We're going to require one more test pit because where they had the proposed infiltration system on their property, it was beyond the 25 feet. So that'll be included as part of the submission that they'll have to do.
May I clarify, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So the, in order to get a building permit under the state building code, you have to have municipal utilities. Now, the city happens to have a municipal storm drain. Not every town or city does. If you had no municipal drain, which this portion of the road doesn't, you could not get a building permit for this site.
Oh, hence
Which is-
the main drain extension.
Yes, it's a condition of the
Got
subdivision.
it. Yep,
That's what I meant.
okay.
And that's the thing that I hope I'm not, it's written by Mr. Cosmo and Mr. Daglian in their reports. It literally says, due to the high groundwater level, it is not feasible to infiltrate the runoff from the extension of the road. Therefore, the applicant is proposing a drain.
Okay.
And what they've modeled, and I believe our engineer is just joining, and he can speak to the modeling and the more technical issues. What they have modeled is the roadway, not the entire amount of new impervious coverage that triggers the major storm permit. And I understand that we haven't fully designed these houses, but you can make a pretty good, based on setbacks, and you can pretty much know what the coverage limitation. They did that for the capacity. So they made assumptions to do a capacity analysis. We got to do the same thing in doing the hydraulic calculations for the runoff. And the reason is because it already has an existing flooding problem. And that has legal significance under the state stormwater standards, how you design stormwater infrastructure.
So I would turn to our engineer who said that you built, that you said something like you're building more than enough capacity for the situation being described, but you need to answer that.
What I had said was that, I mean, first of all, what we talked about as far as the drain extension, infiltrating the roadway sidewalk extension for the subdivision because of its location at the low point of the site there at the property line. It's not feasible to infiltrate that. It's about 2,000 square foot watershed. It's not feasible to infiltrate that on site. We did not do extensive soil testing on the two lots. It may be feasible to do it on the lots depending on whether or not we can raise the grade. All of this would be done, as we've mentioned, in accordance with the stormwater ordinance. So it would have to comply with that in order to get that permit from engineering. So we've said that the extension is needed for the subdivision itself, but the lots themselves, we may be able to infiltrate on site. We don't know till we do the testing, see the size of the houses, determine what happens. There may be a request to have an overflow from the houses, but as I demonstrated, is if it's only the house and the driveway, the system that we're proposing here still has capacity.
Others have questions?
Council Leary,
I
I guess I sort of want to just talk about my understanding of the project right now.
Yep.
And I have to say, what Mr. Murphy had to say resonates with me very much because I do also see this as a holistic issue. I was involved with the revision of our stormwater ordinance just a couple of years ago. And one of the focuses was to not keep putting more stormwater into our storm drains, but to keep it on site. Not only, of course, in the past, they did everything the opposite, right? They got rid of water, they buried streams, and now we're trying to change that. So I understand that perspective and I agree with it. And I have questions beyond this about the subdivision and the Board of Surveyors and how that happens. But that's something else I need to learn for the future. But the other thing is, you mentioned the Massachusetts standard for stormwater standards, which basically says what I just said, that stormwater management standards that post-development peak discharge rate must not exceed pre-development rates. And this means any stormwater management system designed for projects should prevent runoff from increasing the flow of water beyond what was there for the development. There are exceptions to it. And the other thing I will say, there's already a water issue on this road, and that's not caused by anything Betsy's doing. The fact that you have some pumps growing all the time is an issue. So perhaps having this, what I would say, completely heroic efforts to get this to be a buildable lot might actually improve the street, because you'll have, if everyone does actually put the water into the stormwater, if you do connect, you have half the street has no storm drains at all. I was shocked to see that when I went on site. So I'm not sure if that's the case, but this is sort of what I'm thinking. Would it actually improve your situation in the short where you have now, which is not working for you for a number of reasons. But the larger questions is for me is that if you have to make these kind of heroic efforts to build on a lot, that's a big as well. And I saw it at 41 Washington Corner. We had another similar issue of basically a rear lot subdivision. Is this considered a rear lot subdivision?
No.
Okay. It kind of is. Yeah. That was denied by land use committee for water reasons. It went to the ZBA, so it wasn't in our hands, and they're trying to come back and do it anyway. They're appealing our decision.
I'm well aware I'm involved in that case.
That's right. Not his case.
The difference is that they didn't go to these efforts, okay? They refused our request. So that was for additional stormwater mitigation. So it's not exactly the same. But so I'm really like wondering now, would this be a good thing for the neighborhood for Betsy to do all this work, which is, I've never heard of any developer doing this kind of heroic work. It's way above and beyond. You're gonna improve your street. You'll actually have a storm drain. You'll have new catch basins. That might actually, and if you all connect, that might actually improve your situation. So I'm really not sure. That this is just what's going in my mind right now. So you know what I'm thinking.
Can I make a comment about that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not the chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me get these two questions asked, and then we'll come back to you. Council Danberg, I think you're in.
My question was brought up.
Okay, Councilor Kelly and then Councilor Getz, and then we'll come back to you.
Well, no, I'll come back. I mean, I'd like to hear a little bit more. I do have some thoughts. But I don't think I need to speak to it right this second.
Okay,
So-
can
Yeah,
you,
the one question I had was specifically that Attorney Murphy had suggested that the site currently does not percolate. And so it would require 5 feet of fill, which would really change quite a bit, just the whole topography, and it would also even create a new watershed. So I didn't know the implications, in terms of like what we were talking about in terms of timing and the height. Sorry. Okay, yeah, so I was, she couldn't hear me. So I was concerned about like how the tie-in would actually happen. Is it going to be the kind of thing, and then press for additional information in terms of what would be needed in order to, both self-contain all of the water that is going to be created by this new watershed with the, the increase in grade. And whether or not you have any sense, because we went to the site and we actually saw the pretty significant slope that was happening, on the site itself. It dramatically shifted, in terms of where the original house is and then the whole extension of the lot. So there's already a pretty significant grade, on the lot itself.
so the question is,
When and if you need to, to increase the grade, what are the implications of that?
There may or may not be a need to increase it 5 feet. That was requested at the board survey point to give everyone a rough idea of what could happen. So it may not increase by that much, but if the 2 lots are developed, as we've said, we have to do a full site plan to meet the ordinance and a full analysis of the drainage so that we don't create any additional watersheds that cause adverse impacts to anyone. Water, we would do the additional testing to see if we can get an area that perks or potentially a site that has a little bit deeper the groundwater where we could get some infiltration on site. So until we have full building plans, so that we can do average grade, building height, an analysis of on-site impervious area, so that we can show that we're reducing flows for all the storms and how we could potentially grade the site, you can't really come up with an answer for those 2 lots.
now do you want to answer?
Yeah, I do now. But that's not part of this petition or the plans of Betsy Harper.
Correct.
So you're asking us to make a decision based on not knowing any of those conditions that we really need to know in order to make a good consideration. And I believe Attorney Murphy just said that he thinks that the engineer is here, and if he is here, I would like to hear for a few minutes before we hear from the neighbors and before I make a determination myself. Is that possible, Chair?
Is he there now?
Yes, John Cheshire, I'll just introduce him. He submitted a letter in the Friday packet. And let me just add 2 clarifications. One is we actually did look into the cost of connecting for the stubs, and it's gonna run $15,000 to $20,000 for each house to connect. The other thing is that he'll speak to the modeling, but one of the design issues is that the current model apparently doesn't know that the aqueduct is there. It thinks that it's flat and that the water is going to flow through it. But if you go to the site, you see it's 10 feet tall. The water's not going up and over it. So that's one of the things that will, and again, I don't want to grandstand.
Before we get into that,
Hear from Mr.
we're talking about the watersheds for the original subdivision, not the watersheds for this extension, correct?
Well, the aqueduct is there no matter what.
Well, the aqueduct is not part of the watershed for this connection. The watershed, I'm sorry, the aqueduct abuts the property.
Right.
And the existing flow is for the subdivision property is from Homer Street down to the bottom of the slope at the aqueduct, where it flows off-site in the south to a swale that runs behind the houses, behind, on the lower end of, lower side of Chapin.
Yeah, I'm not sure, what's the relevance of the aqueduct to this, to?
Why don't you let him
why-
explain?
We
The
did
aqueduct.
not model anything with the aqueduct involved.
Right, so why is that even an issue? I don't understand why it's an issue.
I think I'm gonna let my engineer explain.
Okay, it gets good.
Okay, yeah, John Cheshire, if you're there.
He's muted at the moment.
Can he unmute?
I'm here.
Yeah.
So
Let's introduce yourself.
I'm John Chessier. I'm a professional engineer. I was asked to take a look at this project by Attorney Murphy and his clients. I did walk the periphery of the site, met with a couple of the abutters and looked at it. There is no swale. Well, maybe there is some sort of a swale, but you got to get up 2 or 3 feet before you get into the swale. So essentially all the water in the area around these 2 lots drains into a low depression on the lower lot next to the aqueduct. It doesn't get out. It stays there. So there is no discharge from it. It would just be trapped. It's like a bathtub. And if you look at Mass GIS, there's a program, Mass GIS Mass Mapper. It has contours. You can see that. Their contours are incomplete. There's a pretty good sized watershed that flows into this low area that would need to be managed. It doesn't get out. They're basically taking and adding new water into the road that wasn't there before. And if they built a house and fill the lower area, they're going to displace the water that currently flows there now. And where's it going to go? It's going to end up on someone else's property because they are the low point. So I think it's a significant issue because to build a house there where it's already got groundwater, essentially, they said a couple of feet at most below grade, you can't build your basement into that. Or you would then again have to pump and have a constant battle with groundwater in a brand new house, which I don't think anybody would be wise to do. And you're going to have all the water in a big storm flowing right down into the lower yard. I mean, I looked at the subdivision plan and I know that's a schematic of what may be there, but that house would get flooded. And you need to look at it as a comprehensive plan and not a piecemeal plan. There's no point to doing the road if you're not going to get the house lots. So you really should look at the big picture and how it's all going to work and do a more detailed topography of how it actually functions.
Can I ask you a question? Did you take the main drain extension into account? In what you just said, did you take the main drain extension into account?
Did I take it into account?
Yes, I mean, you said the water was gonna flow downhill and pond on the property. Did you take the main drain extension that's being proposed into account when you said that?
Yeah, that's higher than the low spot. You'd have to flood to get into the main drain extension. They fill to build it. They fill to build the road. They fill to build their treatment system for the drains. So yeah, I did. It's yeah, it's there. I mean, they're adding water into the street system, and the street system wouldn't be able to take it without basically draining the low area, which would be a massively significant amount of added water into the storm sewer than they've modeled in their analysis provided for this permit.
Okay, so you're saying that their calculations are not accurate and that it would cause flooding?
What I'm saying is that you need to look at it as a holistic approach. They're looking at it as just the road without houses for the new lots. Their analysis doesn't appear to include some of the area from Homer Street that drains down. They just basically say, we have X number of quarter-acre lots. They don't have a watershed plan. They don't show how they got to the numbers other than just this many lots. And I think they underestimated the existing flow to the storm drains right now. And if you fill the low area, that water is going to get displaced somewhere and it's going to flow off into someone else's land and potentially ultimately flow up high enough to flood the road. I doubt it floods the road now. It's about the low spots, at least 2 feet, 2.5 feet lower than the road is at the end of Chapin Road. So that is a large depression that just holds a lot of water. If you go out and look, you can see it. It's pretty obvious. It's not a mystery. And if you look at, topo maps from the state, you can just see the closed figure that it's a hole.
Well, before I ask your engineer to respond, I'm gonna just say that we've been joined by President Laredo, who's a member of the committee. Can you respond to that, please?
Well, one thing is we did do a watershed map to show the watershed to the drain handle that we would connect to. I don't know if you're referring to in one of the comments, there was note of 14, 15 houses, which referred to the number of stubs to the potential abutters, not the total number of lots that contribute to that. There are many more lots than that. It was not based on just a number of lots in the watershed. It was an actual watershed based on some topography. As far as any offsite, ideally, going to the point of designing 2 full site plans, would be beneficial, but it's not feasible at this point because, again, you need full architectural plans, full designs, before even getting approval for the extension. And so whatever happens on site, whether this is a ponding area or a swale, an outlet where it floods a little bit and goes over, that is something that would be addressed at the time of the individual lots. If it changes things, then it would have to change perhaps some of our calculations for this. If it did that, we would have to maybe redesign on site to make sure that that doesn't happen, that we can't contribute additional water to the system or to the abutting properties.
Can I ask this gentleman, because he's been waiting a long time to speak, do you still have your question?
It's a comment and I can supply some information.
And if you could identify yourself.
Raphael Bruckner, 51 Chapin Road. So the counselor at the opposite corner of the table, Councilor Leary. You said you had an interest in finding out more about how the planning board, the zoning board of survey.
Board of surveys,
The
yeah.
board of survey had made that. They had made that decision to approve this subdivision with 4 variances. Basically at the urging of the town zone engineering department, which included public safety related variances. The sidewalk is not the proper size. There are health and safety issues. For example, this is already a non-conforming cul-de-sac. There should be a turnaround at the end. There's no turnaround. It's quite a narrow lane, and you have fire trucks and garbage trucks that back in and back out. Nobody wants that. It's a safety issue. So that was already disregarded at the urging of the town zone engineers. Now we're told that we're just voting on the drain extension. Great, I love the drain extension. We would all agree that having a properly functioning drain would be great for Chapin. Problem I have is that there's a moral hazard involved where the petitioner is going to pay God knows how much money for this massive public works project. Okay, great. We're all so grateful. Now she wants to build a couple eco mansions at the end of the street. The town zone engineer says, yeah, I don't really know if that can be built. Some people think so. Okay, great. Yeah, but there's a hazard here because the petitioner has sunk such a ridiculous cost in it already. Now people start saying, gosh, well, she spent, we got to approve this, I guess. How many more variances are we going to have to approve to get building done on this lower lot, which is, let's just say, it's not buildable. Thank you.
Should we, Councilor Danberg, you have a question. Do you want to ask it? Should we go ahead and ask others from the public?
I'd like to understand, perhaps from your engineer, what if assuming that the lower lot is 2.5 feet below the street level connection. And am I correct in hearing that? How do you solve for that? Is there a way to solve for that when the time comes, as the gentleman says, you sink all this money into doing an extension? Then is there a way that this could be solved so that the lots could be built? And if so,
You'd have to do the design, so you'd have to know the house. You'd have to, I mean, if you can't infiltrate everything on site, as I said, the street system does have capacity to take the roof runoff. If it's lower for some reason, you can take the roof runoff, direct it to a pump chamber, pump to a manhole, flow gravity to the system. You can regrade the site. There are different ways to do it, but until you have full architectural plans and an idea of just how the lot's gonna lay out, you don't know exactly how it's gonna work.
so
But there are ways.
our purview here is to deal with the road extension, not to deal with the houses.
What might be built later.
What might be built later, yes. And essentially, what we're looking at is asking the developer, if the developer is willing to take the risk, or the ultimate owners of the two lots would have to take the risks that they could solve these problems. Is that,
That's my understanding.
yeah, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Should we go around the room and see who else wants to speak? Since we started here, we'll go around. Go ahead, sir, just identify yourself.
Thank you. My name is Abel Muslino. I live on 24 Chapman Road. And I just want to kind of focus back on the catch basin or whatever. The outflow from the catch basin is between 16 and 17. I think that for whatever reason you took as an axiom that this system function, it does not. It does not function, and I'd like to refocus on that. I think one of the slides mentioned that there were 3 or 4 calls in the last 14 years. My wife and I at least made 10 calls actually about flooding on the street. So I don't know what takes place the telephone operator at City Hall, but many calls have been made. Flooding is now the issue is not organic material or debris. We, my good neighborhood, Michael Victor and myself, we go out and clean it from time to time, and it doesn't solve the problem. It's still flooding. This is, I think that was mentioned that this is a micro issue, kind of a Newton-wide issue. It is not, because we have many friends on other streets on Newton, and they don't have the problem. It's kind of unique to our street, and I think you, Constable Dahlbeck, mentioned last time that even your kid mentioned that was unusual to see so much water on that particular street. And I think that the fact that they went with the camera, and that's great, thank you for doing that, and inspecting the outlet of the water, didn't find a problem, doesn't mean there is no problem. I mean, we live there, we know that there is a problem. We facing these floods over and over again. And as I said before, I'm a physician. If you can allow me to bring an example from my practice, if there is a patient with blood in the urine and I do an X-ray, I don't find anything. I don't say there is no problem. There is a problem. And the problem is the recurrent flooding again around the catch basin, which does not necessarily has to do with organic material and debris. So I think that first, this problem has to be addressed. Maybe time has to be taken to inspect the drain basin to see how it functions and ensure that you don't add more volume of water to a system, to a drainage system that is not working as it is right here.
Thank you. I did have a question about that, because did you say, or did someone say that not only was the catch basin clogged, but there was a pathway from the water to the culvert that was also clogged?
Yes.
So who fixes, Mr. Daglian, who fixes if the pathway from the catch basin to the culvert is clogged, who fixes that problem?
That would be the utilities division.
So how often does that get done?
whenever they get a call, according to the Director of Utilities, the 311 system has recorded 3 service requests in 2025, 2024, and 2011. And in every incident, it was the clogged catch basin due to leaves and debris.
So we're not talking about the catch basin itself. We're talking about the pathway from the catch basin into the system.
Right, so when they get that complaint, they also look at the pipes that go from the catch basins to the drain manhole, and then from the drain manhole to the culvert, which they inspected, they CCTV'd, and they indicated that there was no structural condition with it. Whatever blockage was there from the laterals, from the basin to the manhole were removed and cleaned.
Okay, it feels like that checking it once in a while might not be enough, but that might be the issue.
Is your reports, they only received 3 calls in 2025, but this family says they've made 10 calls in the last 2 weeks. There's a discrepancy between the recording of the calls.
So did you maybe?
Over the last at least 5 years, and I think some other neighbors mentioned that they made calls. So 3 calls in what you said 10 years sounds really unbelievably unreliable, let's put it that way.
So let's keep going around. Anybody else on this side want to speak?
I just have one comment to add.
Just identify yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Gary Sand, I'm 23 Chapin Road, right next door to 17. And the only comment I'll add is, I've been in that property for 20+ years, and there's been 2 times we've had flooding on the street, and public works have come out, and they've opened the manhole. The one that was mislabeled, John, as sewer, is actually water. And the water was almost reaching the top of the manhole, but I peeked in when they popped it open, and I saw water at the top, at the crest of that pipe.
So it wasn't draining.
It wasn't. So if in my time that the 12-inch pipe was at capacity, I don't know how we can accommodate more water as part of the subdivision. So I'm really concerned about, again, overwhelming that existing system.
And what's your address again? Where are you?
23 Chapin.
Okay. Anybody else on this side? Yes, please.
Aaron Nyan and 17 Chapin. So we have this kind of picture sent around from earlier this year. So I'd like to take everyone back to mid-February of this year. So we had a lot of snow, right? The ground was just kind of covered in white for about a month. There was a weekend where we were expecting a large snowstorm, and the temperature was into kind of the mid-30s or so. So instead of snow, we got rain, right? And then a couple of days later, it's back in the teens. So what happened was this kind of pool of water here turned into ice, right? And so I live right here, right? So you saw my offspring come in for about 30 seconds earlier. The level of danger that posed by effectively having an ice rink in the middle of the street for what was at the time a 17-month-old and a 3-year-old is something that is terrifying to me, right? And the idea that obviously this is a big problem, and I think a good point was made that whatever we look at with Newton as a whole, I think it's an undeniable fact that Chapin Road has a water issue, right? And the idea of taking on a project to add more water to our street is really it's a tough thing to hear. I work in finance. Like the way I try to think about it is if a company is doing poorly and the solution we come up with is let's lend them more money so they can dig their way out of this, that person will get laughed out of the room. This is the equivalent of that. So.
Or here, starting over this end. Anybody that wants? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Just identify yourself.
One thing that occurs to me.
Just tell us your name and address.
Diane Finkelstein, 50 Chapin Road. It seems like, louder, please. Okay, it seems like the real issue here that everybody's discussing is the existence of the subdivision in the first place. And just to state, we really have no way to go back to that, right? This subdivision exists. Somebody either has to own the land and not do anything with it, or they have to put houses on it. But we can't go back to not having the subdivision. And the second thing that bothers me is it seems like the only answer these committees come up with is, well, let's delay this and get another opinion or another report. And there's a cost to delaying. And I'm not sure, you have to really be careful about what that serves. So those are the 2 points I wanted to make.
Thank you. Now I'm going to start at this end and I'll work my way over to you. Go ahead.
Just this is sort of.
Just tell us your
Oh,
name
I'm
and
sorry,
address.
David Dagg, I live at 44 Chapin Road. I just couldn't help but think when listening to the developer's presentation about rainfall over the last historic rainfalls and her view that maybe we don't need to worry about increasing amounts of intense rainfalls. I assume that because you're a progressive, environmentally conscious developer, you are climate change aware and agree with the general idea that there are more intense rainfalls, but you did cite data that might, or that you asserted that there wasn't any increase in rainfall. And so I'm just going to have to bring up my own subjective, anecdotal experience living here since, 1999 or something now. I'm gonna, based on one extreme that I'm thinking of now, a rain event in December of last year, where most of my lot was flooded in a way that had never happened before. I may have to introduce things like dry wells in order to accommodate the new reality I think that I'm facing now with I think it's climate change. I'm not an expert, but that's what I'm thinking in my somewhat naive mind. And so I think when you say things like, well, we look at the statistics and we're not showing rainfall, I just want to push back on that and say, my subjective experience says that in my own lot, in this sort of gully that we live in here, I'm having to introduce new techniques to address what I think appear to be increasing intense rain events. And I think people that lie in that lot area would have the same kind of problems.
Can I just clarify what I actually said? I said that the data shows that for the last 15 years, surprising to me, surprising to Degor, there has not been an increase or a decrease in rainfall. However, I immediately thereafter said, however, what climate change does is bring heavy storm events that are unusual. And you're citing a storm event, and you have to appreciate and deal with a storm event. And what I'm saying is that many of the houses on the street have a problem that are not ready to deal with those extreme storm events at this point. And so this opportunity to put in a way to connect to a drain that never was there before is an opportunity for you, even though, may cost you X amount of dollars to do the nubbing in. It's going to cost you X amount to do whatever your drywall solution is. There are problems on the street that need to be solved. And that the point of this is that there's not extra water that's coming onto the street because of the subdivision. The water is decreasing onto the street because it's going underneath the street into a storm extension.
How can that be true?
It's not true.
How can that be true?
Because
That's the English saying.
so when it rains, the gutter catches the water, that pipe gets diverted to an underground pipe that goes to an underground storm pipe. So it's actually less water on the surface, more water being directed below grade. So it's controlled. Unlike now, where it's falling on everybody's yard and it's either being diverted through a gutter guard or a sump pump just dumping out in the backyard. What this is doing is actually controlling and filtering the more rainfall, or all the rainfall rather, underground.
But you're adding.
But he doesn't rate it.
So
more capacity to.
yeah, so
He doesn't rate it,
now
pushes
we
you
have
back.
Wait, we can't all talk at once here.
So I'm gonna sort of step back as the developer, petitioner, whatever, I'm gonna pretend I'm a neighbor and I'm living on one of these lots. So if any one of us wants to do an ADU or renovate 50% of our house, guess what? We need a storm system, which means one of us is gonna have to pay for the storm line extension, because really all of us have unbuildable lots today. all of us, because none of us have storm extensions. So somebody's actually like being forced to deal with this tariff, right? That's really a betterment for somebody else in the future to take advantage of. You know, so if anybody here, just to reiterate, if anybody wanted to do an ADU or renovate 50%, you would be required by the engineering department to put it in a storm loan, which means you need overflow, because most of these lots don't have the capacity to deal with it themselves, because everybody's lots are, you know, saturated with too much water. So, you know, this is an incredible opportunity to basically maybe not take advantage of it immediately, but in some future day, be able to start, you know, vacating some of the water that's already saturating your site.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going here. So I think you folks are next.
Yeah, Martin Bernstein, I am at 55 Chapin Road. I'm directly affected because I'm adjacent to this property. So there's a couple of points I want to make. The first one, this shouldn't have been approved in the first place. When we got a notification, ourselves, and across the street, that there was going to be a meeting about the partition of the lot. And that's when I called Rafael to come to the meeting. We were the only ones in the meeting from the neighborhood when that meeting occurred. We posed a whole bunch of questions and concerns. Fire department not even able to turn a truck in the corner, snow cleaning. We've had a long list of things that were awful. I have seen that lot flat many times. You can give me numbers, if it rains, if it doesn't rain, how much rain in 10 years. I've seen that flat, it flats, believe me. So this is absurd, this shouldn't be happening, but go ahead, let's kick the can down the road. Then when we meet again to discuss the construction of the proper, the buildings, we have this issue again. So that's.
Has anybody, before I get to the corner of the room, anybody? In the meantime, do
Yeah.
you want to speak?
Yeah, if I could.
Yeah, I'll connect some.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah, you're fine.
No, it's okay.
So go ahead. I'm sorry, sir, I'm trying to.
I'm Josh Goodman, 37 Chapin Road, and just a couple of quick points. One, I mean, to what Martine just said, you know, that lot 3 is sort of a pond for about 20% of the year. Like if you walk by the aqueduct and look down, I've never jumped into it, but it looks like 6 inches of water above, you know, above grade. So, I mean, just another data point. And I think, you know, I like the idea of tying my sump pump into the municipal system, but I think, you know, my lot can't afford a mistake on this. And it seems like we have DPW saying that they've only gotten, you know, they have 3 data points where the street flooding was a result of blocked, you know, catch basins. And then we have neighbors that live there every day that say they've called more than that, and it happens more than that. So we sort of have, you know, we have a difference of opinion on that. And then we have an engineer we have 2 engineers that seem to disagree, I think. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but it feels that way to me. And it makes me nervous to even have a vote on something when you have, you know, so much factual disagreement on things that are really important. I've had flooding in my basement, and I never want it again.
I want to add one point too on the calling. I called on that example I gave about the, like what I called the ice rink. I called daily for 7 days.
Did you call 311?
So I call City Hall, they patch me to someone, they say, we'll come back to you, there's several requests right now. And then I have to go on with my day.
Yeah, I have a feeling it never makes its way into the 311.
Yeah,
I think that's what's going on.
The fault of the city.
Yeah. Now it's your turn, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Sorry, Josh.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm from the same address. I'm at 37 Chapin Road. My name's Ingrid Schroffner. And I just want to say that, you know, this is within your discretion to allow or not allow this drain plan. And it seems, as my husband just pointed out, that there is a disagreement among the experts. And where there's a disagreement, I would hope that you'd use that discretion to protect the folks in the neighborhood who are really concerned about this. My husband and I have lived there since 2000. We have redone our basement 3 times, each time adding another sump pump. So we have now 4 total. We have a backup battery system and a generator because of this flooding issue. And if there's any more water that gets put on the street, I can't imagine what would happen. And this train system, it's confusing to me. There's like this, like the plan doesn't have like a consideration of this aqueduct, which is clearly there if you're looking at it. I mean, it's a question of like, what's the AI looking at and what's the actual thing in front of you? It seems to me that there are questions about that. We've got the engineers who disagree. And we've got lots of concerns from everybody in this room who's expressed them. And I'm just hoping that you'll exercise your discretion in favor of the folks who are actually living there, have lived there for a long time, albeit, at the expense possibly of, 2 more houses, but there are no people in those houses. It's not like there's a family who's about to live in who wants to move in and like build their dream house. It's like these are not people, but there are people on this road that need to be protected, and we hope you'll exercise your discretion to protect us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Mike Victor, 27 Chapin. I had a question about what has to happen, I can't remember the term. Once the property comes along to find out whether it's buildable, there's the drainage, storm drainage permit.
Stormwater.
What concerns me is that when it was described how that works, I think the engineer said that the site has to do everything possible, feasible to try to keep the water on the site. But, if they can't, then what? If they can't, then I don't know whether they know how much water is going to wind up not being able to be contained from these lakes and whatever that are there. And again, I'm not convinced that this extension could take lots and lots of water, not just the part that couldn't be, infiltrated or whatever the term is.
So before I call on anybody else, President Loretta, you have your hand up. Do you want to say something, ask now, or should I just keep going around the room? I'm almost done going around.
Forgive me, Chair Albright. Why don't you let people speak first? I can't see everybody, so you know they're others still.
Okay, I'll get back to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so.
Just tell us your name and address.
Sorry. Chris Inra. I'm at 132 Homer Street. The original one. So there was a question about fill and drainage on the site and how much fill would there be and so on. And there have also been questions about the initial subdivision meeting. And Councilor Danberg kindly sent that video along. And just from the transcript of that, John Daglian kind of talked a little bit about what kind of drainage would be necessary on site to try to mitigate some of the infiltration or lack of infiltration, really. So what he said is the developers would have to look at, and I'm reading verbatim here, putting a surface detention pond in either property so that the water is withheld for the 100-year storm, and then have the overflow connection with maybe some underground facilities like holding tanks. But those would have to be pumped up into the system that they're proposing. So it's a costly proposition. The other option would be to mound up a system so that they've got at least 2 feet of clearance separation between the seasonal high groundwater itself, and then have additional overflow connections to the city system as they propose. So what he's saying is that you need to build on-site infiltration. Those systems have depth. You cannot put the foundation of those systems within 2 feet of the seasonal high groundwater level. So you need to cover the system. The system has depth. You need 2 feet above the seasonal high groundwater level, which is 22 inches below the surface. So you're already looking at 2 inches plus the depth of the system itself, right? That's a lot of fill. So this idea that who knows how much fill will be there, the precise measurements, you're right, who knows? But the answer is a lot, because again, there's a lot of water to be infiltrated. These systems are going to need to be large, and that's a lot of fill. Now, the developer and the petitioner has said that basically all of our questions have kind of prompted them to look at the plans more closely. All of this is on the plans. And, These are not things that are new. These have been present since July 2023. They were discussed by the city engineer in September 2023. So these are not new issues. And that's why we're asking that, you know, all of this be considered together, because this is where we are, because it wasn't considered together. And these lots, you know, they're on the market to be sold. Like they're not, there's no plan to develop houses right now. They've been on the market for 226 days. And in part, you know, a reasonable, you know, in part it's, they're hard to build on. So that's why we're asking, you know, consider everything together before you propose this, you know, road extension, which again, on the plans, there's about a foot or two of fill to even build the road extension. So, you know, that's kind of our point here, that this is a uniquely hard area to build on, and everything should be considered as a whole instead of piecemeal.
Thank you
To
very
do the
much.
right thing.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
That's, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Me? Oh,
Yes.
I'm Jackie Lupiccolo. I'm also at 132 Homer Street, and I just wanted to call attention to one thing, if Mr. Cheshire is still on. Part of what his analysis had showed was that irrespective of any drainage, there are two abutting properties to this low-lying land, 126 Homer Street and 55 Chapin Road, that will have water directly displaced onto their properties, which will not be drained by a drain, cannot be drained by a drain. So I don't know if Dennis or John want to comment on that, but I feel like that's one thing that's been kind of ignored here. Everybody's focused on the drain, which is great, but about the people immediately next to the lot, where is all that water going to go for them?
Mr. Daglian,
Can
can I ask Mr. Daglian, could you comment on?
Well, I wanted Mr. Cheshire to comment on it first.
Okay, but I don't think it's legal
Okay.
to make a plan that spreads water onto your neighbor's properties. That you have to have a plan that keeps the water on your property or using the overflow.
So, but what's that plan?
We don't have a house designed yet, so we don't know the plan.
So, but when is that gonna happen?
Yeah.
Pardon?
The point.
That's the point, right? Like, shouldn't you?
No, because that's not under our purview. We don't give building
been the-
permits.
that's
We don't
been the
give stormwater permits. That's the engineering department.
But okay, so what do we anticipate will happen then?
They have to have a plan which is approved by the engineering department to show that water will be kept on site or into an overflow system. It's not allowed to go to
Is
the
that-
neighbor's house.
Is that economically feasible? Is that physically possible? Aren't these questions that you would want to know?
They can't get a building permit unless they meet that standard.
And
But-
this,
And so
I think,
they may not get a building permit.
Yeah.
if They cannot meet the standard.
right, so if
But
they may not. get a
developer is
building
in a-
permit.
Tight spot, right?
That's the developer needs to take that risk. That whoever the developer is needs to take that risk. But the city will not give it in answer to your question, what happens to the water that flows onto the neighbors' properties? If they cannot prove that to the city standard, and the city has very high standards on this. If they cannot prove that they can contain all of the water, because as Chairman Albright has said, it is illegal to allow any water from a development to flow onto anyone else's property. If they cannot stop that from happening, they won't get a building permit.
But I think what everyone's concern in this room is that up until this point, the city has approved and waived and approved and waived, and here we all sit with two disputing engineers, and we're saying, well, we'll have to do this again in however many.
Are you worried that water's gonna flow onto your property? I'm just wondering.
I mean, partially.
So you're way,
Why is it gonna go down?
Yeah.
I understand that, but I think your property is like 15 feet uphill. Is it right? Am I right about
Yeah,
that?
our property flows downhill, but I'm raising the point as to why.
No, I get it. I just want to be clear that you're not worried about
That's
water
correct.
flowing onto your
That's
property.
correct.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to speak as well?
No, we're in support, I'm here in support of them. We're on the right side of the stormwater drain. The only two homes on Chapin that have a storm. I'm at 10 Chapin Road. We're on the other side of the stormwater drain. But I will say, like, we've only lived there just over 3 years. I'm Brendan Zimmerman. The 16 Chapin Road has a sewer in their backyard. And like I have seen out our window, their yard be flat with water, right? So like right now their yard is like a U, and their entire yard was a lake for a month. So
Which yard are you talking about?
so that they own that crop, 16 literally was a lake. Now, maybe it was just blacked up with some leaves and that would have fixed everything, but there, without a doubt, especially in the winter when it snows and it blocks the drains, like the water in the area becomes amazing. Luckily for our house, we're not on the low side of the water table, but without a doubt, 16, we've seen it get just massacred by water multiple times in the 3 years we've been.
Okay, so why don't we hear from you, and then we're gonna ask President Laredo to have his say. Go ahead.
So thank you for mentioning how our lot looks like.
Oh, could you just give us your name and address, sorry?
Naomi, and I'm on 24 Chapin, but we own 16 Chapin as well. So thank you. We haven't mentioned how our lots look like, okay? Supposedly this is our problem, but the street is not supposed to be our problem. Whatever you are proposing here is not going to make the street better. You all got this one? Okay. What you see here is only 1 inch that was.
Normally, why don't you show it to the people on the screen because they can't see it?
Well,
The camera's here.
there's a
Where's the-
camera.
Right here.
Camera's right there.
Okay.
The camera's very white.
Oh.
Yeah, that's it.
Good job.
We're just waiting for Naomi.
So the catch basin, the city came in that particular case that you all see, it's in May, and it's capturing photos within 3 hours. It's only 1 inch that within these 3 hours was pouring. Here is the data, okay? We all like data. The city came 2 days before. The city came 1 day before, supposedly clean. Mr. Victor cleaned it as well. And we are talking about, you can look, you all have it, inches of water that is sunk. The city was not able to solve it. Now, only 3 times we called them. Now I've got photos of the truck that is here, okay, of the city. How come that's only 3 times they heard when we have photos of the truck of the city? Not to talk about people who are calling.
Come again more than 3 times.
That's it. So you've got evidence there, okay, timestamp.
Thank you. President Laredo, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize in advance for being late. So I want to just talk about our process a little bit here, and then I want to understand in a little more detail the exact points of disagreement. So, you know, for those of us who've sat in the land use committee, as I have for now a long time, it's often common for us to pass something and then let the various city engineers or other folks approve certain things. And that's fine if it's a routine matter. But this does not strike me at all as a routine matter. The way this system is going to work or not going to work is really the essence of what is before us this evening. And so what I'm hearing, and if the experts can jump in, please correct me, but I want to understand what's happening. So the plans is submitted to Mr. Daglian. Do they include all of the fill and the analysis of what effect the fill is going to have? No. Yes or no?
Wait, so what was your question again, Council President Laredo?
The question is for either Mr. Daglian or the developer's engineer, the plans is submitted do they include all the fill that's going to be on the site? And has that been accounted for in your analysis?
So why don't we start here?
If you're referring to fill on the two lots of the subdivision, lots 2 and 3, that was not considered for the extension.
Why not?
Because those are lots that would be developed at the building permit stage and would have to comply with the stormwater ordinance.
But you're asking us to approve something here, okay? And you're telling us that as proposed, this works, doesn't create a problem. That's what we're being told. That's what our city engineer is saying. But if you're not analyzing it with consideration of what we know is going to exist in the site, I don't know how we can make that determination.
We don't know exactly what's gonna exist at the development stage. And I think it's been mentioned a few times that if the development of the two lots contributes to extra flow to the system or flow to the abutting properties, they won't get a building permit.
But
So-
here's the problem with your analysis, okay? At least to me. Right now, we're in a public forum. The residents have an opportunity to be heard in the public forum. We're before elected officials who are accountable to the residents and the voters. You're proposing a process where the only accountability is to the city engineer and there's zero oversight by this body.
Here.
Is that what you're saying? That's what you're asking us to do, right?
I believe that's the procedure.
Those are the procedures, Council President.
Well, but you're again, I'm very comfortable because I have tremendous confidence in Mr. Daglian. And ordinarily in land use, for example, we do that all the time. We say, you know what, the end piece, Mr. Daglian will review the plans. He's knowledgeable, he's capable. But this is not ordinary. The whole essence of this project is whether or not it's going to work. I hope it does. I really hope it does. Because if it does, then it will be better for everybody and the developer can go ahead and develop and it's all going to work. But it seems to me that I'm not comfortable right now approving something without that basic information. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just add, I want this to work. We want folks to be able to develop. But we need some assurance here, and the public needs some assurance that we're doing our due diligence. Thank you.
Mr. Daglian?
The two lots that are proposed on the subdivision are going to have to go through a rigorous stormwater management review when they get application for a site plan, submittal, and a building permit. They're going to have to hold the 100-year storm event on site to the best practical extent as DEP requires. So they will have infiltration systems that hold that water and slowly infiltrate to the best extent. And if the groundwater, they have to have 2-foot separation between the groundwater, seasonal groundwater and the bottom of their system. They should be able to have a large enough retainage system, chambers or infiltration Caltech units, or whatever proprietary systems that the engineer will design to hold and store the 100-year storm. If they can't do that, they would be allowed to have a stormwater overflow connection to this drain line, which has occurred throughout the city for the past 25 plus years that I've been here and even predating me. The drain main extension as proposed is going to vastly help the people who've got sump pumps on their properties. Right now, they're just discharging on their lots, and that's going to recycle back in their basement, and it's going to be nonstop recycling of their groundwater problems. With the proposed stub laterals that they're going to put in, they'll have the ability to pump up to a manhole system that'll feed gravity to this drain line. It'll take the water away from their property, and that way they're having less groundwater infiltration on their site. Will they get 100% reduction? No, they're still going to get some water in the basement because you got cracks here and there, but at least the water's not getting recycled back into the system. So whatever water they pump out will get away from their site, get into the culvert and go down to the city drainage system. But those individual lots will have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, and they'll have to go through a review. And if they go higher than the grading that's proposed, they'll have to get a special permit, and that'll trigger even more intense review.
Can I point out before he said,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
can I point out before he said,
Wait,
I
wait a
don't know.
second,
Let the chair lead the meeting.
Yeah, can you hold that thought a
Sure.
minute? So Attorney Lee, and I'm Mr. Chessie, I see your hand is up and I'll call you in a minute also. Attorney Lee, can you help us a little bit here in the sense that we have a request for a main drain extension? And what the neighbors are worried about is that we'll give the main drain extension and then that there's gonna be some houses that may cause future problems. To what extent can we take this future unknown properties into account in our decision for this main drain extension? Can you add any light, shed any light on this?
He's on mute.
Oh, can you
Yeah,
give him,
you're muted,
can you
Mr.
give
Lee.
him the, sorry.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to be absolutely clear, and I think most people get this, but it bears repeating. Currently before this committee is just a question of whether or not to extend the main drain. The standard to extend the main drain is whether or not it's determined that's necessary for the public convenience or the public health. That's the standard, that's the discretion that the city council has. So, you know, you need to rely on the credible evidence that's been in the record. You need to look at the capacity of the main drain, what's anticipated to go into the main drain. So those are the considerations. They're not considerations of will this potential new lots or building on it create runoff onto other properties. It all has to do with the main drain itself and whether or not this extension of the main drain, again, would be necessary for the public convenience or the public health. And that's the standard. I can elaborate more if there's specific questions, but the general question you asked, that's the answer.
Well, that helps me anyway. Mr. Chessie, I'm gonna call Mr. Chessie since he's got his hand raised and I'll come back to you. Is that okay? Okay, Mr. Chessie?
Excuse me, I just wanted to make out a point here. When the definitive subdivision plans were filed and the analysis was done for the drainage, the assumption was made that the water runs off to the aqueduct, which it doesn't. So there was a fatal flaw in that was never addressed. Now, what's happening is they're adding flow to the street system. They've done calculations to say, well, it's got capacity for this added flow. It's 100% added flow from the road. It's purely an increase in flow. Now, what everyone's concerned with, because there are current flooding issues, is if you continue to add flow, which it's been said, well, if they can't accommodate the drainage on the lot, maybe they'll have to pump it or put it into the drain that they've just built to make it work. Now how much capacity is in the drain? Basically, it's build the drain, get this permit, come back with the lots and well, we can't infiltrate it. We got to do this. We'll just pump it up into this drain because now we have it. That's the concern. And the fact that the first go around, they had a flaw in their analysis that assumed that the water runs off when it doesn't and it just sits in the hole in the bottom, makes everybody a little uncomfortable who lives in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Run off into the aqueduct. Are you referring to the aqueduct that abuts the property in the back or on the side? I guess it is. I don't know where it is. But if the aqueduct that's higher up and it's outside the fence, is that the aqueduct you're referring to?
Yeah, the aqueduct's parallel where the trail is. It goes, parallel to the back line, runs right along the back of all the houses on Chapin Road.
Thank you.
If you look at the analysis that they did in their definitive subdivision plan, what they did is they took a watershed existing, the subdivision, then they took the watershed proposed with the road. The road all drains down into Chapin Road, into that system. So that's pure added water to the Chapin Road drainage system. Then they said, well, we have a reduction to the aqueduct because obviously we took out this piece of the road and put it into the new road and put it into Chapin Road. But They failed to address the fact that they fill for the road and that they were filling a hole that traps water and has no outlet.
So, thank you.
So they made that error in the first submission. And now we've raised it, and hopefully if they do come to building lots, they'll address that and not flood out everybody that abuts it. But you can understand the concern of why we shouldn't allow this permit, because there was a flaw in the subdivision in the first place. That it said the water runs off into the aqueduct area.
Okay, thank you for that. Could you explain, because I thought the aqueduct is not.
Is not involved.
Yeah,
It's not, it was not a flaw. There was an existing watershed to a point, whether it's a ponding area or an outlet. That was the design point, existing watershed of the subdivision. We extended the road, so there was a small 2,000 plus square foot second watershed after development, which obviously does reduce that first watershed. So there is a reduction in the watershed that in flow of the watershed that goes toward, we'll call it the ponding area, the aqueduct, the outlet, whatever it would be. There is an increase because of the road, but since we can't infiltrate it on site, we're adding that unit for phosphorus removal and then outletting as an overflow into this drain extension, as is typical in the city when you can't meet all of it on site. So with the overflow, there is no increase in runoff to the street.
okay.
If we were to develop the subdivision without the overflow, yes, there would be an increase in the street. But that is not the case. That was never the proposal.
So I don't, and I think Councilor Danberg has the same question. When I asked him earlier, what does the aqueduct have to do with this? You said nothing. Nothing. It
It's
doesn't have.
nothing because the aqueduct watershed does not get to Chapin Road, so that watershed does not factor into the calculations for the capacity of this extension.
Is there a connection of this proposed drainage system into the aqueduct? Because I understood, I'm confused about it. It looks to me like there's only a connection into the culvert, the 1930s yellow line culvert, and not into the aqueduct. Is that the case or not?
The extension is a connection to the manhole that is about 60 feet away from the culvert. We're not connecting to the culvert, we're connecting to a manhole and a 12-inch pipe.
Right. And so these calculations that Mr. Chesia said about the aqueduct were not taken into account or were wrong.
They were not taken into consideration for the design of this extension because that water does not get to the system.
So Mr. Chesia, if the water doesn't get to the aqueduct, why do you bring it up?
What I brought up is that the calculations, what they said as the design point was the aqueduct. I'm not saying it's water connected into the aqueduct. I'm saying that in the calculations, it implied that water from the site ran off into the aqueduct area, but it doesn't. It stays in the hole. In addition, when you fill part of the hole, which they are for the roadway, you typically assess whether or not that's going to displace other water that's currently trapped, and is that going to flood over into the neighboring areas? You would model the low area as a pond. It's water runs off. It doesn't actually run off. It runs into. So you should assess how much water runs into the hole, how high does it get, and how much does it flood, and where does it go? That's what should have been done with the subdivision, but wasn't. Now, because of that, people are a little concerned.
It would happen again at the building permit stage. It is not a consideration for the subdivision itself, and it is not a consideration for sizing this pipe. It is a consideration, I agree with that, at the time we have to comply with the stormwater.
Okay. Councilor Kelly, did you?
I would like to speak at this point. It's clear we have two different engineering reports, two different professional sources who are disagreeing here. And it's hard for us who are not engineers to figure out which one do we believe. I'm a landscape architect and site planner by profession. As some of you saw me, some of us went out to the site last week, and luckily it was a rainy day. It was only 2 days ago. Well, I felt like forever, but it was raining, which is very handy when you're looking at a site like this, because we got to see pooling in the streets. We got to stand in what is the low point of the neighborhood. If I were designing that site, that's where I would put the retention pond, because that's the low point. That's where you would dig that. That's where you would want all the water to accumulate there. One of the neighbors, I think she's gone now, told me that ducks swim in that. Sometimes you see ducks swimming there. That is a low point. It is a pond. It's a retention pond. One of the points President Laredo made, and he was a chair of the land use committee before I chair it now, was that we often refer or defer to Mr. Daglian for later approval of things that come before us. One thing that seems different to me about this is that when we do that, there are plans. We know what it is that he has to analyze and design for and approve. This is so open-ended, I'm really uncomfortable with that. Like, we need to approve something now, we have no idea what that's going to be like later. And that is giving me a big level of discomfort, as well as hearing from a room full of people now for the second time about their concerns living nearby. For me, after I've heard all this, and I've been trying to be open and fair to all sides of it, I think it's presumptuous to couch this as an opportunity for the neighbors. You know, that was said. What I really think this is, you know, an advantage for the developer to help bail themselves out of the situation. The main objective really is to benefit them. If the neighbors want to buy into this system, which I agree with Mr. Daglian, this could be very advantageous if every neighbor along Chapin Road wanted to spend $15,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 and tie into the stub. That might be helpful to them. In my experience in Newton, homeowners don't typically want to do that. They don't want to do the assessment. They don't want to add the new concrete, the granite curbing, which would be helpful in this location also, but they haven't done that. And generally people say, I've been here for 5, 10, 15, 25, 40 years. It's fine. I'm not spending that extra money to do it. So though it might be an advantage, I think it's asking a lot of them. If it were truly the solution for, as Councilor Lee said, the public convenience and health, then the city would install that system, not a developer, and say, you should tie into this because that will really help your drainage situation. That low point, I'm so uncertain, because we're uncertain about the actual buildings and structure and construction will be, and maybe a couple people here have mentioned that, which was my first assessment of the site. Like, if I were looking at this as a design project, I would have said unbuildable. I think I'll pass. This is not a good site to build on. I think it's asking too much to approve this and expect the neighbors to buy into a system that's going to cost them money that may or may not, perhaps possibly likely will help them at their expense, just to benefit this owner. I have now become convinced that this heroic effort and this moral hazard is something that is not the city's responsibility to support at the potential expense of the neighbors for one new home lot builder. So that's kind of where I've finally come down on it.
I'm Councilor Leader, before I call on you, we have a gentleman from Shulman.
Just briefly, Mr. Daglian said sump pump I can speak for runs onto my driveway and out into the street. So it doesn't directly recycle. That might be a misperception, at least for some lots. I just wonder.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. I didn't know.
Yes.
I just want to add a quick
So if you
something.
could just identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Lori Berenstein. I'm at 55 Chapin. But my neighbor across from me had just moved into a nursing home. So she's not here and she feels the way we feel. And I just thought I should express that because she didn't want this either. So that's all.
Okay. Councilor Leary?
I just wanted to sum up sort of after all the information that has come out tonight and all the reading I've done on it and this visit, where I'm gonna land. So I was hoping to hear that, and I was thinking, as I expressed earlier, that I thought this, all these stormwater infrastructure improvements, which come at very great cost, and as I said, is really a heroic effort, might actually improve the water problems that exist on the street now. And I already mentioned the reason why I thought that you already have a water problem now, whatever, and that might do that. But after hearing all the uncertainty about it, and even though we're only looking at this particular item, which is the storm drain, the intent is to build on it. And that there's just too much uncertainty for me to say that I can vote for this. And I had an experience in my ward on Clinton Street where, because when this one of the I can't remember your name. Is it Josh?
Yes.
No, the one behind you.
It's good. Yeah, that's fine.
You were talking about all the work that has to go into bringing more fill in to create more space when you're building these infrastructure stormwater treatments. And that caused a street in my neighborhood to go up 8 feet higher than we thought it was going to go up. It caused so much consternation. So I am really much more careful about, the city isn't correct all the time. There's all, engineers do the best they can. But I'm feeling way too uncomfortable to approve this request at this point. So that's where I'm landing.
Anybody else that wants?
I had my point from,
Yeah, please.
not if there's anybody else, please.
No, go, please, go ahead.
It was just kind of would have been more timely a few minutes ago, but makes the point that everybody's addressing, which is that earlier in the meeting, the engineer had said, is this lot buildable? I don't know, some people think it is. He then said, well, stormwater management, yeah, they impound some of the water and then they put the excess into the pipe. Great. Let's approve the stormwater management plan now. You're not voting. Yeah, you're not voting for just the drain extension. You're voting to build these 2 houses with no plans. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm actually, where we started, and I really appreciated what you brought to the table in terms of, the assessment and what was said. Just in terms of like how much would have to happen on the site in order to, make it viable. And that very much concerns me. I just sort of feel as if towards the back of the lot, this may only be in potentially the upper lot being buildable, but not the lower lot. It just may turn out to be that problem. But I was also very concerned about, just the amount of, I can see it now, I can visualize this grade change that's going to be pretty significant to house all of what's needed in terms of all of the systems. And then it turns into this, machination of like, I can see the pipe work going from the 10 feet up, down, and then getting piped into this main drain extension. So I too am uncomfortable in terms of supporting this, because I feel as if we know that this lot is proposed to be developed. And I sort of feel as if we're only given half of the picture right now. Half of the story is not, 1/10 of the story. And I don't think that we're specifically, entertaining the road. I think we really are, we need to think about the full viability of those 2 lots. So I'm pretty much not ready, or I'm not going to be supporting this.
So I have a question for the petitioner who's listening to all of this stuff. And clearly the issue is, I don't think the issue is with the main drain extension. I think the issue is the unknowable of what plan.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you're interested in withdrawing your request for the main drain extension until you can come in with a partner, either yourself or with someone else, to do the 2 houses. It's just something that I've been thinking about.
If you read the room, that may be advantageous to you to withdraw without prejudice now, rather than I think the chair is nicely, subtly getting at.
Before Betsy answers, I have a question.
can it be a basis of design? In other words, a proof of concept?
Well, I think people are.
Because what you're looking for is, can the lower lot 3, the one with the bowl, if we can demonstrate that a variety of different options or just a standard option, because there is a basis of design now. But if there was a more comprehensive basis of design that demonstrated that there was an economically viable, not crazy tall thing that met, that satisfied the question, would that be satisfactory?
Would that help, counselors? You would have to be very specific
I
plans.
think you need to come back with that. And I don't know if the development team is interested in thinking about developing one of the lots versus 2, if that's economically viable for the team. That's something you all have to think about. I see what you're asking. We haven't heard from Councilor Gentile or particularly Laredo, but that may help you decide how to proceed tonight if you know which way the vote might go.
So while you're thinking about that, I think we'll go to Councilor Danberg and then President Laredo.
Okay, I'm looking at this photograph and the ones that are in this packet. And it looks to me as though there is considerably more water in the street than what fell from the sky onto just the asphalt. And so if that's the case, can Mr. Daglian shed any light on this? Is the pooling in the street greater than what falls on the street? And what I'm asking is, does that mean that this water, a lot of it is coming from the lawns that are higher than the street?
That's at the
and
high
pooling
point.
onto and pooling onto, where does this water come from?
That's not coming from.
Besides coming from the sky.
If I can answer, that comes from the backup catch basin.
Yeah, so if you can,
Catch basin, it's not doing it.
Okay, so my next question is, what type of pooling, did this happen before the clog was discovered in the pathway? Or did they clear the clog in the pathway and then this still happened?
I don't know when that photograph was taken, and I'd have to get confirmation on the dates that they flushed and cleaned out the catch basins and the laterals.
The photo is from May 30th, 2024, and I'd like to know, is this still happening to this extent, after the clog was cleared? And so it is the clog, was that the problem here, or do we continue to have May 30th, 2024?
No, what was the date it was unclogged, you're saying?
Yes, what was the date that it was unclogged? When did you find it?
From what I understand, the unclogging and investigation was just recently done.
Just recently done. So have we seen it in March? Have we seen this level of that? Has it improved since then, neighborhood?
Not for the significant rainstorm.
Yeah, I don't know
Not
if
for
we've had-
significant rainstorm. I mean, 2 days ago, we had relatively mild rainstorm, so that's fine. But when you get a significant rainstorm, again, the current drainage does not work.
Does not.
Vicky,
So-
Vicky, the photos that you have here is after the city cleaned the catch base.
Yes, the catch basin, but the catch basin cleaning apparently was a Sisyphean effort, because there was a clog that was preventing, when this gentleman went down and peered into number 22, I think.
Gary.
Yeah, this gentleman, number 22, I wrote it down, peered into the open hole, and the water was not draining at all.
The water was bursting.
That means that there was a clog someplace. So what my thought here is that I would like to see if this situation can be improved for the neighbors.
Yeah.
Because if we do nothing, then this is what you're gonna have for the rest of time.
Sure.
So,
Especially if you add more water, to the system.
And so what can be done to improve the situation so that this doesn't happen anymore? Is it a function of the city coming down once a week and clearing the catch basin and putting a camera down and making sure that there are no clogs? The city doesn't have the capacity to do that. We don't have the manpower to be able to do that.
Well, I think that the curbing that they're talking about,
Yes.
will help that.
So the curbing would help. Is there a measure that we could do to see if we could take a baby step toward fixing this? And might that be the 6 feet of curbing in front of at least the 2 existing?
I don't think we can ask the petitioner to do that.
But that's it. We're asking the petitioner to do that.
Yeah.
And if the drainage system were built and the buildability of at least lot 2 would be in question, and that again, that if they're not presenting the plans for the houses at the same time as the plans for the drainage, if the drainage system works, then at least the neighborhood has relief from that. And but I don't think that at this table, and if we don't have the support at this table, we're not going to have the support on the floor of the board, for sure, because they look at how the committee that has spent 3 hours dealing with this votes, and they're not going to second guess us. So I think that Councilor Chairman Albright's suggestion that it be withdrawn without prejudice until a developer can be found and we can get potential plans to see how this will all fit together makes some sense. But the neighborhood is going to have to live with your existing conditions until such time as that would happen.
Right.
No improvement
So
will
let
be
me
made.
call President Laredo.
So, whether it is withdrawn without prejudice, which just allows you to come back and refile, no harm, no foul, or whether we were to hold it in abeyance to see if we get more information, my sense procedurally, it would be a lot cleaner to withdraw without prejudice. Again, I want to reiterate, and I think I speak for my colleagues, we actually want all this to work. We want this to work. We just, at least I need some evidence that it's going to work so that we can vote in favor of it. And that right now, at least, is missing. So I think the developer, with the developer's engineer, to me, it doesn't have to be with 100% of certainty. I'm not looking for, beyond detail, exactly what you would build, precise measurements of, every inch of the design, but sufficient so that we can make an informed judgment. Yes, it's going to pass muster, or no, it's not. I actually think that's in everyone's favor because the developer's going to have to do this anyways. So why not do it here?
Laredo, how would you vote tonight?
I would suggest we ask that it be withdrawn without prejudice, but if not, we could hold it and give the developer an opportunity to think about it before we take it up at full council. You can always poll the committee at that time, Chair Albright, to substitute withdrawal without prejudice if you want.
So allow me to say one more thing, if I may, and that is, if it's not withdrawn and we vote on it and vote it down, and it goes to the main council and they vote it down, then there's a 2-year waiting.
You can't come back for 2
list.
years.
You cannot come back for 2 years.
That's what I'm suggesting.
If it's withdrawn without prejudice, then if a month from now, we have a developer and the developer can get a plan, we could move forward. with
So
this.
it seems to me that there are two options, or there are three. One is that, as you can hear, that the committee seems to be wanting to vote it down as it is. So that's one option. Two other options are withdrawal without prejudice, and then we come back with a design. Or the third thing is, as President Laredo was saying, is could you, and sort of you were saying, could you come back, we could hold it, and you could come back and see if you can come back with plans that satisfy people's understanding that this can be done without screwing up the rest of the street.
Can I ask for one
That was
more
a technical term, screwing up the rest of the street.
This has to do with John Dagland, because it needs to be vetted
Yes,
by the department.
yes.
John, are you there? He's gone.
No, he's here.
John,
There.
since this is not a formal permit review, is your department open and able and willing to review and kind of a quasi project? This is a little unconventional.
I mean, it's not like legally binding because it's not a real permit submission for an actual house, but if it's gonna be something that this committee would entertain, we would provide the technical support for that.
The developer.
So it's up to
could
you.
Say, I'm not gonna build
Before
that.
we vote on it, you guys should decide how you would like to proceed.
Or we could hold it tonight, and you can make your decision, and then we can decide at the next meeting how we're gonna vote. If that would give you more time to think about it.
I don't fully,
So hold.
holding is.
Move it to-
Continue, kind of.
Yeah,
Like
continue
the full
it
continue
tonight.
and that you would come back and look at it once I have provided more plans.
Yeah, so
Right.
that, there, yeah.
And the other option is to withdraw it without prejudice and then present it with more plans.
Yeah.
So I don't, so in either case, you're asking me to create more plans that are.
Or have a small one.
It's hard for me to know the definition of how much you're gonna. What those plans are gonna be that are gonna satisfy you, because as you know, I am selling the lots and I am not developing those, I'm not building those houses, I'm not designing those houses. So it's very a difficult conversation, or it's hard for me to understand what the parameters are that are gonna satisfy you. in
So
terms
that's
of
why I
plan.
suggested that you could come back with your partner or your developer, whatever you wanna call them. If you're selling them and there's gonna be somebody new, that person would come back.
People who are interested in buying the lots,
We have to,
will want to have had the drain extension done ahead of time.
okay.
That's the condition under which they're interested in purchasing them.
But.
So I don't have a
I'm-
developer to come back to you with.
Okay.
I'm not a lawyer, but perhaps one of
I
our,
have one here.
yes, one of our lawyers could answer the question. Is there a way to structure an agreement whereby the potential developer is off the hook if the drainage system doesn't get built?
Counselor, may I just interject here, Madam Chair? We should not and cannot provide any legal guidance as to what a private agreement might be or not be. They can do whatever they want. It seems to me, for what it's worth, I appreciate that they're trying to sell this and they need the permit to do so, if that's a condition. But that really, I mean, that isn't our issue. If the person buying this has a concept that it gives us enough information so we can make a reasoned judgment, I'm all for it. As I said earlier, I would like this project to succeed, but we just need sufficient information about what level of fill is going to be like, what the house is going to be like, where it's going to be located, all the basics that if this was a land use project, we would have completely in front of us. We don't need that level of detail, it seems to me, but we certainly need more than we have here. So that's my thought, and I'll leave it there.
Councilor Gentile, do you have anything to add to the conversation? Or,
No, I'm fine if you want to hold it or she wants to withdraw it, but I certainly wouldn't vote for it tonight.
So it won't pass. It will not pass tonight. Just for you to understand that, okay.
So, so to give the petitioner more time to think about it, because this is a twist and a turn for her, should we hold this tonight?
I think that's fair, Chair Albright. I think we want to be fair to the petitioner, let her have time to think about things.
Yes, I will move to hold.
Okay, so Counselor Danberg has moved to hold. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? So,
And that's kind of indefinite. I mean, there's not.
yeah, I'm not sure when, and we have a very packed agenda coming up. I'm not sure exactly when this will be back on the agenda, but you have a list of names.
I do.
So we make sure
I
everyone
will,
gets.
I will keep you involved, with any.
Thank you, Mr. Street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Super.
Yeah.
Recording stopped.
Well, I would love to be the only way you're gonna get to see for that rating system. You have to be built. When you said that you think we could have that.
As I understand, you're really like on bills. Appreciate that. Yeah. Good luck. So I'm